Chapter 40, 387. It probably had something to do with the 10,000-year-old shark pearl. The 10,000-year-old shark pearl was so powerful that obtaining it was like obtaining a source of power. How could such a sacred item not move one's heart? How could one not be happy with it? Arbor didn't have a physical body at the moment. She was just thinking about it habitually, pacing back and forth in the room. She understood. She finally understood. Fan Xiuhe had been ordered by Mu Qingya to study her inner world because she wanted the shark pearl, right? Mu Qingya, this woman, had indeed hidden her true intentions well. Why did he always make her mistakenly think that it was a love affair or a grudge? Who knew that it was actually for this 10,000-year-old shark pearl? Arbor's soul couldn't help but shudder at this thought. Mu Qingya really made her hair stand on end. She had arranged so many things to target her and thought of ways to break her wings. She even controlled her like in her previous life and threw her into that dark and shabby underground laboratory. Just to dig out the shark pearl in her body? But she didn't tell Fan Xiuhe anything. She only let him study her inner world. Shark pearl, 10,000-year-old shark pearl. Mu Qingya actually wanted this shark pearl in her dreams? Xiao Mu wanted to look up at the sky and laugh heartily, but the abnormally sour and bitter feeling in her heart prevented her from even crying. She thought about how sad her past life was. How could he forget such an important thing? Once he did, he would forget it for a lifetime. She couldn't remember it at all. Mu Qingya wanted the shark pearl. The Wangchuan dragon family also wanted this shark pearl. They all wanted it. Did she have to give it to them just because they wanted it? What a joke. This 10,000-year-old shark pearl was left to her by her mother, so it was hers. She was stupid in the past and didn't know the reason. Now that she knew, she would take good care of it. She had to go back. Go back immediately. Go back to Jojo's side.
Her soul struggled for a while.
As if sensing her restlessness, Mo Lian hastily reached out to hold her slightly cold small hand. A pair of warm hands held her small hands firmly in his and cupped them. Jojo, do you feel cold? Jojo hasn't woken up yet? Mu Xingchen walked in and glanced at the bed worriedly.
You can't just stay here all the time. Go eat something.
Mu Xingchen glanced at Mo Lian and couldn't help but sigh. It had only been 3 days, and this fellow had almost turned himself into something that was neither human nor ghost. Mo Lian ignored her and continued to hold Arbor's hand, muttering, Jojo, Jojo. The venerable peach blossom immortal walked over and extended his finger to release a strand of divine consciousness. He frowned slightly and only withdrew his divine consciousness after a long while. Logically speaking, he should have woken up. At this time, Arbor's divine ruins realm and consciousness had all stabilized. This morning, they could all contact Qiu. Why didn't she wake up? She's in a dream. Sikong Fuling's cold voice sounded from outside the window. Beside her stood the smiling young Master Ding. Miss Sikong. Mu Xingchen was desperate and hurried over to push open the door. Do you have a way to wake Jojo up? Of course. Sikong Fuling picked up her nightmare, demonic flute. The ancients used to fight poison with poison. This saying is not false at all. I can enter a dream with a dream and order him to wake up immediately. Will it hurt his divine consciousness? The venerable peach blossom immortal frowned and asked in a low voice. Chapter 40, 388. Sikong Fuling shook her head decisively. Of course not. The venerable peach blossom immortal and Mu Xingchen both glanced sideways at Mo Lian. This matter still had to be decided by Mo Lian. Should they let Sikong Fuling interfere in Jojo's matter? What were the chances of success of entering a dream with a dream that Sikong Fuling spoke of? No one could be sure if it was really as she said, that Jojo's divine consciousness would not be harmed at all. Sikong Fuling did not force them. She only glanced at Mo Lian and said mildly, You'd better make a decision as soon as possible. In her situation, if she can't withdraw in time, it will harm her divine consciousness instead. In an especially serious situation, she may not be able to come out after entering a dream. The venerable peach blossom immortal glared at her. Sikong Fuling silently shut her mouth and turned to walk out. I'm not exaggerating. It's not impossible for you to do it. Mo Lien's gloomy voice sounded faintly. But I want to enter the dream personally to bring her out. What? Sikong Fuling's expression grew increasingly serious. This is very dangerous. If your divine consciousness leaves your body and enters her dream, there's no way to reverse the situation if anything happens. You have to consider it carefully. Mo Lien stood up and glanced at her coldly. You strongly object to me entering the dream. Do you want to take the opportunity to spy on something? Sikong Fuling's expression darkened as she turned to look at Ding Yun beside her. But Ding Yun said with a smile, okay. Sikong Fuling could not help snorting and pursing her lips disdainfully. The venerable peach blossom immortal glanced at her. So many evasions. Don't tell me Mo Lien guessed correctly? Sikong Fuling glared at the latter. Mu Xingchen saw that the atmosphere was not good and hurriedly smiled to smooth things over. Miss Sikong, with Mo Lien's help, I believe that you can definitely pull Jojo out of the dream faster. Let's try. Holding a pitch-black nightmare demonic flute, Sikong Fuling coolly swept a glance at the group. Let's get the ugly words out of the way first. Once your highness enters the dream, you must follow my instructions. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to shoulder the responsibility if something were to happen and you or Qiao Mu were to be harmed. She spoke in an enigmatic tone, but Mo Lien didn't pay much attention to her. He merely looked at Qiao Mu on the bed and grasped her hand, nodding absent-mindedly. Okay. Sikong Fuling turned her head and exchanged a glance with Cult Master Ding. A devilish smile appeared on the corners of the latter's lips. He tilted his head slightly and said softly and slowly, since we've agreed, then let's go and prepare first. The peony fairy leaned against the door and turned her head to look at the back of the siblings. She raised her eyebrows slightly and asked with a faint smile, are they trustworthy? Little Tai Sui rolled its eyes. I also don't think it's trustworthy. Mu Xingchen glanced at them and sighed softly. But what that Miss Sikong said is not completely unreasonable. If you want to enter a dream, then so be it. What do you need to prepare? It really seems like you're stalling for time. Little Tai Sui snorted and waved his little hand slightly. He glanced at the silent Mo Lien. Hey, what's your plan?
Say it.
If you don't say it, how are they going to cooperate? The peony fairy smiled and patted little Tai Sui's shoulder, provoking an angry glare from him. Mo Lien picked up his wife and walked out, saying coolly, many thanks. I do need your help. Chapter 40, 389. Little Tai Sui rolled his eyes at his back. I'm not used to being so polite all of a sudden. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but laugh. She walked over and grabbed little Tai Sui. If you're worried, just worry. There's nothing to be ashamed of even if you say it. What's wrong with you? You always like to talk sarcastically. Little Tai Sui's face immediately flushed red. He was so angry that he wanted to struggle free from Yuan Shurchen's claws. Who has the leisure to worry about that guy? Let go, let go. What kind of scandal is this for a real man to pull and pull? Yuan Shurchen directly glanced at his short figure out of the corner of her eye. Sorry, I couldn't tell that you were a real man. Little Tai Sui was so angry that he wanted to kick her. Shut up. Everyone left the court and went to the Fengtai waterside pavilion in front of them. They saw Mo Lien standing there with Arbor in her arms. Cult Master Ding and Sikong Fuling walked down from the balcony and smiled at everyone. It's about time. Follow me. Everyone followed him into the waterside pavilion. At a glance, they saw that many talisman papers had been used to set up a spirit-guiding talisman array that wasn't particularly complicated. Mo Lien walked over with Arbor in her arms and gently placed it in the center of the talisman array. She then sat down and supported Sikong Fuling's hand. Sikong Fuling flicked the nightmare demonic flute in her hand and said indifferently, after entering the dream, you must bring it out within 2 hours. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted. If it's more serious, it will stimulate your divine sense. You have to pay attention to the time. Mo Lien coldly replied, let's begin. Without waiting for Sikong Fuling to retort, little Tai Sui, Peony Fairy, Ginkgo Fairy, Thin Tuchuo, and Daoji all sat outside the talisman array. They each guarded a corner and joined forces to set up the array. A light barrier fell on the talisman array. The 5 people entered the state and closed their eyes in silence. Sikong Fuling slightly tightened her grip on the nightmare demonic flute and turned to look at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was standing leisurely outside the talisman array. Why doesn't Venerable Immortal Lord join their defensive array? Infuriating, this was clearly not trusting her, Sikong Fuling. The reason why the 5 of them had joined hands to set up the defensive array was to prevent her from secretly causing trouble for Prince Mo. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at her innocently. He blinked and smiled. One must always be wary of others. Don't you think so, Miss Sikong? Gritting her teeth, Sikong Fuling turned back to glance at Cult Master Ding. If her brother hadn't dragged her here to save Arbor, she wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. She wouldn't have begged to stay here and be doubted by others. I'm sorry. Mu Xingqian hastily stepped forward to appease Sikong Fuling, just like when he was putting out the fire. Miss Sikong, this matter is of great importance. It's understandable for them to be a little more careful.
Huh?
Sikong Fuling coldly glanced at Mu Xingqian. Ding Yun, who was by the side, did not take it to heart as he smiled. Fu Ling, no need to mind. You will use your actions to prove, slap, the truth in the face. Let Venerable Immortal Lord know that they are really thinking too much. Sikong Fuling snorted and nodded. She reached out to pick up the nightmare, demonic flute. Prince Mo, there may be miasma disturbance in the dream. You must not forcibly break it, so as to avoid harming Arbor's soul. After saying this, Sikong Fuling could not be bothered to say anything else. A sinister tune immediately sounded. Like a cold stream from a cold spring, it seeped into everyone's hearts inch by inch. It was so cold that they couldn't help shivering and cowering slightly. Chapter 40, 390. Arbor struggled bitterly for 2 days, but she still couldn't break out of this soul state. She was a little worried. What was this situation? If she was in a dream, she was actually like a bystander floating around behind her previous life. If she wasn't in a dream, everything in front of her was too realistic. The sun rose and set. Autumn left and winter came. Counting the days, she seemed to have already been with her previous life for 4 months. In these 4 months, she had once again witnessed how difficult it had been for her in her previous life. She watched as she walked on the ground and continuously exercised. She stumbled, fell, stood up and fell again. Until now, she could already walk stably. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl in her previous life didn't seem to have such excellent recovery ability as it did in this life. Arbor thought to herself, it's probably because the mermaid pearl seal was only torn open a little in her previous life, so not much power flowed out. Unlike her current life, when the mermaid pearl fought the black dragon at the bottom of the river of forgetfulness, the seal was completely broken. Hey, stoic face, look here and here. Where are your eyes looking? A young man's clear voice suddenly sounded at the entrance of the courtyard. Arbor turned around and saw the black-clothed young man transformed from the stupid dragon standing in front of the pavilion under a pear tree that hadn't bloomed for a long time. He looked over with a smile. The previous life looked at him expressionlessly. Her long hair fluttered slightly in the cold wind. She was dressed in a plain snow-white robe, and her eyes were calm. Arbor was a little dazed for a moment. Why does this feeling of looking into a mirror feel so strange? Looking at her is like looking at my own stoic face. Arbor subconsciously reached out to touch his small face. So, I've been stoic for 2 lifetimes. Is this your sword? He ran over and handed her a purple-black longsword that looked a little old. Although her previous life's limbs had recovered quite well, she obviously couldn't pick up such a heavy sword. So Qiaomu then saw that sword fall from her arms to the ground with a bang, smashing into the muddy ground. The purple firmament thunder dragon curled his lips and bent down to pick up the sword. He patted the dirt off the sword and whispered, "Why is a girl like you carrying such a heavy sword?" Arbor floated in front of them and reached out to touch his sword. There was a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. She had once dug out this sword from a pile of corpses. In her previous life, it had always been by her side, cutting down countless zombies. Although in the end, it had become so blunt that it could not cut anything, it was still a thought in her mind. Everything had changed too much in this life. Even if she tried her best to find it, she was afraid that she would not be able to find it. Therefore, she never thought of looking for it in the first place. There were some things and things that were enough to be remembered in one's heart. There was no need to seek perfection in everything. Here, the youth pushed the sword into her arms, such a heavy sword. In the future, let the armament master refine it for you. No need. Classmate Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon blinked and suddenly jumped up. Are you talking to me? Huh, did the heavens open their eyes today? One had to know that his master had asked him to protect this stoic face. He usually came to this courtyard for a stroll when he had nothing to do. He didn't know how many times he had talked to her, but she never responded. Many times, the youth was about to shut himself off. When a mute speaks, an iron tree blossoms. Chapter 4391. Qian Shun glanced at him.
No.
Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon couldn't keep up with her thoughts and scratched his head dumbly.
No what?
But Qian Shun ignored him and laboriously hugged her sword as she turned around. Her arms still felt weak, and the heavy sword slid to the ground once again. Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon bent down to pick it up and vigorously patted the dirt and dust off it. He had a flash of inspiration as he exclaimed, I got it. You're saying there's no flower, right? Arbor couldn't help but roll her eyes. When she turned around, she saw two young sirs in snow-white robes strolling over from one end of the corridor. Their robes were light and broad, their sleeves fluttering. Their features were picturesque, as if in a dream. It was actually eldest young Master Qin, and that fifth young Master Qin, whom she had met a few times. Arbor naturally felt an indescribable shock. Why doesn't she remember anything? From the looks of it, she really did know quite a few people from the Qin estate in the past. She vaguely remembered how she felt when she first saw Omega Kotoku at the Qin estate's entrance as a servant girl. Some were stunned, some were shocked, and some were confused. She recognized this nightmarish person, and she also recognized his pair of cold and beautiful eyes. But she couldn't remember his name. Did she really not remember, or was she deliberately trying not to remember? It was completely unknown now. As Qiao Mu stood stiffly in that courtyard, she could clearly hear eldest young Sir Qin's low, teasing chuckle.
Who is that?
Eldest young master, fifth young master. This is second young master's Miss Qiao. The steward's voice lowered. Second younger brother seems to be slacking off recently. Eldest brother, I think that girl is quite nice. She's much better than that noisy second young Miss. Eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but burst into laughter. In your opinion, it's better not to make a fuss than to make a fuss. Arbor stood there in a daze for a while. Her memories were in a mess and she couldn't connect them. When had she ever seen so many people? Even worse, since she had already stood up in her previous life, why did it feel like all her limbs were broken and she had never crawled back up in her subsequent memories? Was she still missing an important part of her past? What was it? What was it? Arbor's soul floated in the air, reaching out to hit his own head. However, she heard the Omega Kotoku's calm voice coming from the entrance of the courtyard. Jojo, I've brought the person you wanted to see. Arbor subconsciously looked over, and his eyes couldn't help but sway slightly. She saw a skinny young man in green standing 5 steps away from the second young master, staring at her in a daze. Of course, the young man wasn't looking at her. His gaze went past her and looked at his previous life standing on the stairs. Arbor turned around and looked at her. The former life's eyes reddened, and she suddenly smiled at that person. In an instant, it was like a blooming flower. That smile also made Arbor feel a little surprised. I actually look this good when I smile? I'm not being narcissistic. Although this face is pale and without any makeup, it is still beautiful when she smiles. So this is where I first met Duan Muqing. I don't seem to remember anything. While Arbor was in a daze, she suddenly felt a slight ripple in the air in front of her. A pair of hands abruptly reached out from the torn void and hugged her tightly.
Who is it?
Arbor heard the two young masters of the Cheen estate shout angrily. 2 gusts of wind followed. Chapter 4392. However, she was immediately pulled into the spatial fissure. She couldn't help but pat her chest as she mused. Eldest Cheen and Omega Kotoku, these 2 people, are quite sharp. She was merely a soul. When she was pulled out of the dream, there was a faint spatial fluctuation, and the 2 of them immediately detected a clue. It truly wasn't easy. That pair of hands that tore open the void just now was undoubtedly her dear husband's. However, Arbor couldn't help but frown when she saw that she was in a boundless, white fog. What was going on? Didn't hubby pull her out of that dream? Why was hubby gone now, and she was the only one left? Why couldn't she even see a ghost in this white fog? Hubby, quickly come out, the little stoic called out in displeasure with a stoic face. She ran back and forth in the white fog for who knew how long, but she still didn't see his figure. What was going on? Could it be that this white fog was also her dream? She actually hadn't escaped from the dream yet? From afar, she seemed to see a figure continuously waving at her. Arbor strained her eyes to look over, and saw a woman walking over from the rolling fog. She held a flute in her hand, and a demonic tune rose in spirals. This flute tune sounded familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before. Arbor was slightly alarmed, and she looked down at her soul. This drifting appearance truly made people feel very helpless. The rolling white fog in front of her didn't seem to disperse, and the flute tune was getting closer and closer. When Arbor saw the figure of the person in front of her clearly, she couldn't help but be shocked. It was Sikong Fulling? Did Sikong Fulling enter her dream? Hubby clearly grabbed her just now, but the 2 of them separated in the blink of an eye. Could it be this Sikong Fulling's doing? Quickly come over. Sikong Fulling was also somewhat exhausted at this time. Arbor's dream simply made her want to vomit blood. Although she had mentally prepared herself that a crafty little girl like her would definitely be engulfed in white fog in her dream, she reckoned that she wouldn't be able to see anything useful. However, she still didn't expect that this girl would be so deranged. How was this white fog? It was simply level 18 fog, alright? As soon as she entered the Arbor dream, she almost lost her sense of direction. She had no idea where to go. Alright, I won't be able to find any useful information anyway. It was better to get this swindler out of here as soon as possible. As Sikong Fulling thought this, her heart couldn't help but feel stifled when she saw the young lady's expressionless face and suspicious gaze. She really regretted entering the dream to see this guy. Wouldn't it be better to have so much free time to eat melon seeds and drink tea? Why did he have to come and help Prince Simo enter his dreams? Why did his body suddenly fly up? By the time Sikong Fulling realized it, she had already flown out and landed heavily in the thick fog. Should he thank this stoic face for making the surrounding fog so dense? She fell into the thick fog, but she was not injured. When she stood up with a stupefied look on her face, she saw that Emo Lian had already rushed to Arbor's side and pulled her into his embrace. Sikong Fulling couldn't help but secretly grind her teeth. She had deliberately used the sound of the flute to separate the 2 of them. However, she didn't expect that this guy, Prince Emo, would actually be able to return so quickly. Hubby. The little stoic felt extremely aggrieved when she saw him. Why did you take so long to come? She had been on tenterhooks in her dream for 4 months and couldn't even leave. It was truly worrying. Emo Lian hastily hugged his wife, his heart aching terribly. Jojo, it's my fault, I came late. Punish me, punish me, punish you for kissing me. Chapter 4393. Sikong Fulling's jaw was about to drop. Why did this Prince Mo seem to be even more stinky and shameless than when he was on Sikong Planet? Who were you letting down by publicly throwing dog food in front of her like this? Wait a minute. Sikong Fulling suddenly thought of something and sized the 2 up with an inexplicably strange gaze. You guys, how is this possible? Hugging each other? Strictly speaking, this was Arbor's dream. How could Prince Mo, as an external divine sense body, be hugging Arbor's soul body.
She had to calm down.
She breathed in, and exhaled again to calm her mind. Sikong fully glared at them. Seeing the two of them hugging each other intimately, she couldn't help but get angry. Still not leaving? Look at this stoic face. He created so much fog here, but we don't even know where the exit is now. Mo Lian hugged his wife and turned to glare at Sikong fully. As expected, you're up to no good. He had clearly hugged Jojo just now, but the scene before his eyes had changed in an instant. The two of them had probably been disturbed by Sikong Fulling's flute music, which was why they had inexplicably separated. Sikong Fulling naturally wouldn't admit it. She said angrily with a cold face, "Isn't that because this stoic face is so guarded? Who else could set up fog in a dream so dense that we can't even see the path clearly?" As she spoke, she felt something bump into her back. Sikong Fulling was greatly alarmed. She gripped the nightmare demonic flute tightly and swiftly turned around. "Who is it?" This stoic face wanted to trick her again, right? Sorry, Miss Sikong. Did I accidentally hurt you?" Mu Xingqian's voice drifted into her ears through the thick fog. Sikong Fulling gritted her teeth in anger and thought, this stoic face, this swindler, made the place she was standing in especially dense fog. He actually only realized now that Mu Xingqian was behind her. "Why are you here?" "I saw that a lot of time had passed, but you and Mo Lian still hadn't returned. In my impatience, I followed you into the formation." Sikong Fulling took 2 deep breaths and couldn't help but twitch her mouth when she turned around. Mu Xingqian was clearly standing behind her, but she couldn't even see his shadow through the layers of fog. Sikong Fulling could only continue to play her flute to explore the path, occasionally speaking to Mu Xingqian expressionlessly, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. Your sister is such a troublemaker. She messed up her dream. If you don't obediently follow my flute music, you won't be able to leave and will be locked in your sister's dream forever." Mu Xingqian hurriedly said, "Miss Sikong, don't worry. I've been following behind you. Where did my sister and brother-in-law go?" "How would I know?" Sikong Fulling unhappily roared at him. If she knew, why would she still be here talking to him like a poor mushroom? While he was talking to Mu Xingqian, Arbor and Mo Lian both disappeared. Sikong Fulling had an impulse to run over right now, grab that stoic face, and kick her to death with punches and kicks. I really have nothing better to do than to get involved in such muddy water. Hurry and leave. Sikong Fulling's flute music paused for a moment before she discovered that the thick fog all around them was sweeping over. Thus, she didn't dare to stop playing and continued to use the nightmare, demonic flute to search for a way out. She could only secretly curse Arbor in her heart for causing trouble. What do you think she's after? She's just an onlooker. Isn't it good to just watch the show? Chapter 4394. It was her fault for not being rewarded for her kindness. Yet, she had to come here and cause such a scene. Miss Sikong, be careful. A strong force suddenly pushed her to the side from behind. At the same time, a black dragon's claw suddenly reached out from the rolling fog and flattened the hillside in front of her in an instant. Fuck, what's going on? Sikong Fulling looked at the scene in front of her with trepidation. Just a moment ago, the scenery in front of her rapidly changed. Without the dense fog, a clear sky instantly appeared before her eyes. At this time, she and Mu Xingqian were standing on a barren hillside, and the black dragon that was flying in the air and extending its claw toward her, its entire body exuded a terrifying holy beast's coercion. With her current realm, let alone a claw from a holy beast, she was afraid that a single toe from it would be enough to pulverize her. It's a black dragon. Mu Xingqian couldn't help but be alarmed. That ancient black dragon. Sikong Fulling clutched the nightmare demonic flute tightly and shouted as she ran in a panic, "Mu Xingqian, you recognize this guy?" Jojo was previously injured by this black dragon at the bottom of the River of Forgetfulness and then fell into a coma, Mu Xingqian said briefly and then asked with a puzzled expression, "But why is it here? Why are you saying so much?" "It's chasing after us." Sikong Fulling was so anxious that she stomped her feet and roared. She turned around and hurriedly ran forward while playing the flute. Mu Xingqian was naturally not stupid. Looking at this black dragon's ferocious appearance, it didn't seem to be here for a heart-to-heart talk in Jojo's dream. This black dragon inexplicably appeared and suddenly swept toward them. The two of them rolled and crawled down the hillside and rushed into the forest in front of them without a care. The more they ran, the more familiar it seemed. Fuck, this looks a bit like the Phoenix Mulin. Sikong Fuling roared against the wind. It is the Phoenix Mulin. Miss Sikong, quickly get out of the way. Mu Xingqian pushed Sikong Fuling away. The black dragon's huge tail swept across a circle of trees in a split second, sweeping up the towering trees behind them and flinging them away. The two of them were running at full speed. From time to time, the dragon would poke its ferocious head out from between the gaps of the trees, extending its claws and slapping the two of them on the back. Oh my god, what kind of pervert did I provoke? Sikong Fuling's face scrunched up, scrunched up, scrunched up again, and then scrunched up again. She looked up to the sky and howled in grief and indignation. I know. Your sister is a freak. She materialized the dreamscape.
What?
You still don't understand? Sikong Fuling angrily clenched her fists as she ran through the forest. The stoic face really is a pervert. She views me, who invaded her dream, as an enemy. Materialization of the dreamscape, summoning corporeal ferocious beasts. She wants to keep me here. How is that possible? Sister won't hurt us. Why not? What do you think she won't do in her dreams? Also, not us. It's me. Mu Xingqian silently lowered his eyes. I think she did it unintentionally. Ah. Sikong Fuling madly charged forward. Arbor, get out here. Damn stoic face, get out here. If the stoic face was in front of her right now, she would definitely pounce on her and bite her to death. Regardless of whether it was intentional or not, the fact that this damn pervert could do such a thing proved that she wasn't human at all. What kind of person could be so strange and come up with so many deceptive tricks in their dreams? It's her, it's her, it's only her. Chapter 4395. Mu Xingqian ran wildly with Sikong Fuling and hurriedly placated her. Miss Sikong, don't panic. I'll call younger sister and have her stop first. Sikong Fuling looked up at the sky in grief and indignation, wanting to cry, but having no tears. She rolled and crawled to avoid several trees that pounced on her. Arbor, get out here. Sikong Fuling roared angrily, startling countless birds in the forest. Haha, this stoic face really did create a complete forest of phoenix trees in his dream. Miss Sikong, don't panic. Let's head forward. There's a cave up ahead. Let's go in and take shelter. Arbor pulled Mo Lian's hand and suddenly appeared at the top of a tree. Why did Big Brother also come in? Jojo, don't let your imagination run wild. Put away that black dragon. Mo Lian was speechless. Big Brother can't handle it. What kind of joke was this? He and Ma Yingqian weren't a match for that mature sacred beast even if they worked together, let alone a mere deity realm Mu Xingqian. Okay. Arbor nodded. With a thought, that black dragon that was chasing after Sikong Fuling and was about to bite off half her head with a crunch. Amidst Sikong Fuling's wailing and howling, she abruptly transformed into a black whirlwind that hurriedly swept into the sky and abruptly disappeared without a trace. Sikong Fuling fell to the ground with trembling legs, her calves twitching uncontrollably. Her eyes contained indescribable horror as she looked at Arbor and Mo Lian, who floated to the ground. You. Sikong Fuling pointed at Arbor with a trembling finger. She was stifled in her heart and couldn't take a deep breath for a long time. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. You entered my dream with ulterior motives and wanted to spy on my past. You wanted to trick me. Who wants to trick you? Who can trick you? Sikong Fuling trembled with anger and had the misconception that she didn't want to talk to this stoic face anymore. Arbor extended 2 fingers and gestured with his eyes.
I saw it.
Startled, Sikong Fuling's small face contorted slightly. You entered my dream and used the flute to find the way. You wanted to find me before Mo Lian did. You deliberately used the flute to lead him to another fork in the road. If not for the fact that Jojo's lotus had the ability to tear through the void, he would probably have to go around in circles several times in this dream realm and might not be able to find her before Sikong Fuling. Mo Lien gave Sikong Fuling an icy look. In the end, Sikong Fuling fell silent. She had never intended for Mo Lien to get involved. Unfortunately, he insisted on entering the dream and personally bringing Arbor out, which really made her feel very inconvenient. I sincerely wish to enter a dream and take you away from this place, Sikong Fuling suddenly said. Arbor nodded calmly. I know. Otherwise, how do you think you've survived until now? Sikong Fuling looked at her cold and bright eyes and suddenly shuddered a little. Sikong Fuling seemed to have read some kind of meaning from her eyes. Sikong Fuling only felt her back drenched in cold sweat. She inexplicably felt her whole body go limp, as if she couldn't muster up any strength from this fright. Sikong Fuling's cold sweat trickled down. Do you suppress? You entered my dream. Do you still think you can do anything? Arbor shot her an indifferent glance. Mu Xingchen hurriedly pleaded for leniency for Sikong Fuling. Younger sister, Miss Sikong probably misunderstood because she was curious. Chapter 4396. At this time, Sikong Fuling was naturally certain that Arbor was completely unaffected by the nightmare demonic flute's control. Even in a dream, Arbor could counter her with just a wisp of his soul. Materialization of dreams and suppression of dreams. Arbor seemed to be innately adept at all of this. He used it effortlessly and effortlessly. Younger sister, Miss Sikong probably didn't intentionally pry into your dream. Mu Xingchen did his best to build a bridge to put out the fire and diligently smooth things over. For the first time, Sikong Fuling realized that this handsome man in front of her was actually quite pleasing to the eye. At the very least, this person's words were definitely more reliable and nice-sounding than his younger sister Arbor's. Arbor glanced at his eldest brother before sweeping a glance at Sikong Fuling, who was standing stiffly on the side. Sikong Fuling immediately stammered, stoic face. I entered your dream to save you. Arbor retracted his gaze and clenched his small fists. Clear the way with the flute and lead us out. Sikong Fuling understood his meaning from observing his movements. You have such high control over your dream. Why can't you get out? Arbor expressionlessly looked at her and said, Of course I can get out. But since you're here, let me see your skills. Ha! Sikong Fuling secretly rolled her eyes fiercely. Don't think that I can believe you just because you're expressionless and speak as if it's true. Your prideful nature already allows you to see everything clearly. It's really strange. This little stoic is such a formidable figure, yet she was actually trapped in a dream and couldn't get out? The thick miasma before her eyes wasn't the most realistic dream at the bottom of her heart. Then what kind of dream did the little stoic experience this time? What exactly was the secret hidden in the depths of her heart? Sikong Fuling suddenly sensed a severe gaze land on her. When she looked up and met Prince Mo's glinting phoenix eyes, her heart involuntarily shivered. You'd best stay out of things that you don't need to care about. Sikong Fuling pursed her lips. Isn't this just because I'm curious? Mo Lien scoffed coldly, but she was very disapproving in her heart. Would Sikong Fuling be curious? Of course she wouldn't. She had the nightmare magic flute and had probably entered many people's dreams in the past. How could she be curious about Jojo's dream? It must have been the Hierophant who had instigated her to go into Jojo's dream and find out what it was so that he could take advantage of it. Mo Lien felt that she must have found out the truth. She became even more wary of Ding Yun. It was extremely abnormal for this fellow to appear here. He must have a close relationship with the disgusting Wang Chuan dragon clan. At the center of the mystical guiding glyph formation, there were ripples of water-like vibrations. Little Taisui, Dao Wuji, and the others who were sitting in a circle around the rune formation all opened their eyes slightly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal stood outside the talisman array. His guarded expression relaxed a little as he slowly turned to look into the talisman array. Mo Lien, Mu Xingchen, and Sikong Fuling opened their eyes one after another. In the end, Arbor suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up from the ground. He raised his hand and tugged at his husband's sleeve. "Let's go." Mo Lien also immediately stood up. She pulled Arbor's small hand and said to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others, "Let's return to Cloud Court first." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal followed them without a second word, leaving the Ding siblings behind. Sikong Fuling furtively looked up at Ding Yun and stammered, "Brother, we didn't find anything." Chapter 4397. Not only did she return empty-handed, but she also cut an especially sorry figure. Sikong Fuling looked down at her hair that was as messy as a chicken's nest and her clothes that were riddled with holes. She involuntarily wanted to cry, but had no tears. Previously, she was almost slapped to death by Black Dragon's claws several times as he played with her like a human-shaped doll. Now that the crisis was averted and she returned to her senses, Sikong Fuling discovered that there was practically not a single piece of undamaged cloth on her body. How could she be in such a miserable state? Sikong Fuling couldn't help but want to scratch her head hysterically. The little stoic was too infuriating to look at. Infuriating. Ding Yun didn't say much. He merely consoled her after seeing her sorry figure and sent her back to her room to rest. Meanwhile, he slowly strolled toward Cloud Park while inwardly plotting who he should find to inquire about the little stoic's current situation. Just as he stepped out of the waterside pavilion's perimeter, he saw a beam of divine light shoot up into the sky from a courtyard in the northwest corner and hover in the sky for a long time without dispersing. Fuck, that's the advancement light. Ding Yun quickened his steps and rushed toward the small courtyard. He inwardly pondered, could it be that the little stoic advanced? At the same time, the alarmed Dragon Clan members also rushed toward Cloud Park under Long Qian's lead. The experts of the Dragon Clan from all directions rushed towards the Cloud Mansion. Everyone gathered at the entrance of the Cloud Mansion. Who's advancing at the bottom of the River of Forgetfulness? Such a dazzling advancement light. Could it be that someone is advancing to the divine realm here and is about to enter the five-spirit cycle of reincarnation? That won't do. Are they trying to kill all of us by drawing the heavenly law's five spirits to the bottom of the sea? The bottom of the River of Forgetfulness can't withstand the bombardment of the heavenly law's chaotic reincarnation of the five spirits. Everyone, quiet down, quiet down. Long Qian took a deep breath and blocked the entrance to the courtyard as he shouted at everyone. Long Qian frowned and glanced at his grandson before asking gravely, "Long Qian, do you know who's advancing here?" Long Xiangyun couldn't resist pursing her lips and inwardly thought, if grandmother knew that little evildoer's abilities, she probably wouldn't ask this question. Since the little evildoer's body carried the 10,000-year-old shark pearl, is there still a need to ask this question now that the pearl break out of the seal? Who was advancing here? Aside from the demonic genius who broke the seal on the Jiao Pearl, Xiaochen could not think of a second person. Long Qian's face darkened, and she was about to speak. The door was suddenly pulled open from the inside. Mo Lien raised her phoenix eyes slightly, her gaze indifferent. She stood at the door and glanced at the people outside. What's the matter? Long Qian knew that she had already offended her grandson-in-law, so she thought about her tone before asking, who is advancing here? Previously, there was already someone in your team who triggered the heavenly lightning and heavenly fire due to the five spirits' reincarnation. Can you ask that expert to move to the island outside? Before Mo Lien could reply with a sneer, a faint laugh came from outside the crowd. Clan leader Long, aren't you making things difficult for him? Young Master Ding chuckled as he walked to the front of the crowd and glanced at Long Qian, whose face had turned green. How can you interrupt him at such a critical juncture? If something goes wrong, you won't be able to take responsibility. Long Qian's face was filled with anger. Just as she was about to speak, the light of advancement shone once again. In an instant, the entire Dragon Clan's land was illuminated as bright as day. Everyone was surprised. Chapter 4398. Long Qian and everyone else looked up at the source of the light, their hearts feeling uncomfortable as if they were being scratched by a cat. They really wanted to rush in and see who was causing such a commotion. Is there a problem with this advancement light? A Forgotten River Dragon clan member raised an objection. Am I seeing things? Why do I feel like it's flashed 3 times? Long Shangyun said expressionlessly, You're not seeing things. It's indeed 3 times. In other words, it was very likely that the little stoic had advanced 3 minor realms in a short few minutes.
Haha.
That clansman glanced at Long Shangyun with an odd expression. What's going on? Miss Shangyun's expression looks a little strange. What level is this person advancing? She's not a great spiritual master, right? She should be a low-level spiritual master. It was still that brother who thought he was seeing things. If she's an advanced-level spiritual master, it's impossible for her to advance so rapidly. Everyone knew that after entering the 10th level of spiritual masters, their advancement would become increasingly slow. Especially after experiencing the 5-spirit reincarnation cycle, cultivators who had reached the divine realm might not be able to advance 1 minor realm after 3 to 5 years, or even 8 to 10 years on their slow cultivation path. Sometimes, advancing 1 major realm can consume a person's entire life. That brother's spittle flew everywhere as Long Shangyun rolled her eyes at him. Shut up. She couldn't take it anymore and interrupted that idiot's incessant rambling. Don't you smell an aura that surpasses spirit power coming from all directions? Surpassing spirit power? What kind of power could it be? Naturally, it was the mighty divine power of a divine realm cultivator. The analytical emperor, who had been analyzing confidently, instantly widened his eyes. It can't be? That's right, it couldn't be. The Forgotten River Dragon clan members all looked at their clan leader, whose expression was turning increasingly ugly. Long Qian took a deep breath and turned to Mo Lian with clenched fists. She's advancing? No wonder there was such a big commotion. Do you think it's a good thing to indulge her like this? Once she can't control the power of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, then she, bang. Mo Lian didn't hold back at all, and directly slammed the court door shut in front of this dragon clan leader. A few of the younger generation of the dragon clan who were filled with righteous indignation raised their swords and sabers, wanting to kick the door open and argue with Mo Lian. However, when he kicked it, it was as if he had kicked a hard iron plate. Taking a closer look, Yun Mansion was surrounded by a defensive barrier. Prince Mo must have left something behind to prevent them from barging in. Long Qian didn't leave with her men. Instead, she stood at the entrance of Yun Mansion, feeling tormented and exhausted. His body and mind were ravaged as he looked at it, and the light of advancement kept coming out of it. When dawn came, everyone's faces were numb, and their eyes were red as they stared in the direction of Yun Garden. They waited for another hour. The Emperor of Analysis from before finally opened his mouth and said weakly, It seems to have stopped advancing. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief, as if they had been granted amnesty. 19 times. That night, that pervert, demon, leveled up 19 times in a frenzy. He skipped 3 to 4 major realms in a row, which was a total of 19 minor realms. Everyone from the Forgotten River Dragon clan really wanted to knock on the door and ask the person inside, Are you still human? Arbor exhaled deeply and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Mo Lian, who was standing at the door and smiling at him. The little stoic's eyes lit up, and she hopped off the bed. Chapter 4399. Mo Lian could not help but laugh. He reached out to catch his wife, who was bouncing over, and rubbed his chin on her furry head. Jojo, how do you feel? Arbor raised her little head and looked at him with sparkling eyes. Not bad. Her advancement this time was surprisingly smooth. In less than a day, her cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds. Arbor subconsciously raised her hand and touched her lower abdomen. This time, the Divine Ruins realm had strengthened and expanded. When she looked inside herself, she could clearly see the 10,000-year-old shark pearl that was hiding in the Divine Ruins realm and did not dare to see her. This 10,000-year-old shark pearl was very intelligent. It seemed to have realized that when the seal had exploded, it had caused her to be injured, and its behavior was very bad. Therefore, it was very understanding. In order to make up for its previous mistake, it tried its best to help her advance. She had started from a level 2 God tier master and reached the peak of a level 5 God tier master. She had jumped over so many small thresholds that she could not even count them with 2 hands. She could not even count the number of times she had advanced so quickly in the 3 continents. When ordinary people stepped onto the God tier master steps, 10 or 20 years would be like a day. There were many people who would risk their lives to climb a small step. But she had advanced 3 major realms in one go. It was really indescribable. The Divine Division Record's soul chapter had already broken through to the 10th level. A 10th branch vein had formed in her spirit vein. When the seal on the shark pearl was broken, the trembling of her tendons and her god power had disappeared. Between the 10 branch veins and the main vein, god power was endlessly flowing. It was as if a river had gathered and formed an ocean. Emolien couldn't help smiling when he saw her glowing eyes and glowing with vigor. He liked to see her bright and spirited appearance. Reaching out to pull her into his embrace, Prince Emo raised his hand and gently caressed her cheek. "Jojo, you really scared me before." Arbor looked at him apologetically and patted his chest. "Don't be afraid. Haven't I profited from this disaster and am safe now?" Profited from this disaster. Emolien muttered to herself. She pinched her little chin and said, "This is a blessing in disguise. You really scared me to death." Xiaomu tilted her small head and nuzzled in his embrace again and again before wrapping her arms around his waist and hugging him tightly, blatantly flirting. "Don't mess around." Prince Emo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out to support her body and lowered his head to bite her lips. "Your husband will resist." The little stoic threw him a small come-at-me look and even tilted her head, her expression very deadpan and taut. It was too vivid. She was like a little kitten, scratching his heart with her 2 little claws. Emolien grabbed her waist and gritted her teeth. "Ha, you asked for it. Don't beg for mercy later if you have the guts." Before he could finish his words, there was a knock on the door. The little stoic suddenly giggled at him and pushed away her pitiful wooden-headed husband. She turned around and ran to open the door while saying, "What are you knocking for?" "I'm here." "Greetings to the Crown Princess." A hidden guard stood at the door and bowed respectfully. Suddenly, he felt 2 knife-like gazes on him. The hidden guard inexplicably glanced at them and immediately straightened his body like a statue. He stammered, "Greetings to His Highness the Crown Prince." Why is His Highness looking at me with such a murderous gaze? He didn't do anything out of line. "What is it?" the little stoic asked. The hidden guard continued to stutter. "The Night Pavilion sent news." Chapter 40, 400. The secret guard peeked at the Crown Prince's tense face and became even more anxious. "The 10,000 elites that we sent previously met up with elites from the Tsong province in front of the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge. But what?" Arbor frowned and quickly asked. The secret guard was stuttering, and it was tiring to listen to him. The secret guard quickly cupped his hands and said, "They disappeared very quickly. Even the Night Pavilion couldn't contact them." "Disappeared near the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge? 20,000 people?" Arbor was in disbelief. Yes. The secret guard quickly nodded. "I heard that there is a large deserted island nearby, and no one has set foot there in the past few decades. 20,000 elites from the Tsong province, and the Tsong province had mysteriously disappeared from a deserted island near the Snowy Ridge." This wasn't good news. The elites from the 2 provinces had quietly disappeared from the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge. They weren't ordinary soldiers, and they were all above the 12th level of the spiritual realm. How is it possible for them to disappear without any warning? Also, it was impossible for them to gather so many elites in such a short period of time. Arbor knew that the situation was serious, and he quickly turned to look at the Crown Prince. Prince Emo walked forward and said in a deep voice, "Continue to ask the Night Pavilion to gather information. We must find out what happened." "Yes." The secret guard quickly cupped his hands and left in a hurry. Arbor turned to look at Lien with a serious expression. Do you want to go and take a look? 20,000 people suddenly disappeared, and it wasn't a small matter. Lien nodded.
All right. There was something fishy about this.
How could 20,000 elites suddenly disappear from a deserted island in front of the snowy mountains? With so many people, even if there was a battle, it wouldn't be a small matter. Arbor walked out of the door and said, I'll inform everyone to move out. Lien quickly followed him and pulled him to her side. Long Qian is outside. Arbor sneered. One wouldn't visit a temple without a reason. Could it be that these mermen are here for the ownership of the 10,000-year mermaid pearl? Lien looked down at her and said softly, You don't have to care about what they say. Of course. Arbor's expression was cold.
Who has the time to care about them?
Whether these people lived or died in the future had nothing to do with her. Lien grasped her small hand and lowered his head to look at her. Are you angry?
No.
Arbor shook his head and pulled him out of the door. He whispered, Don't worry. These people have nothing to do with me. Lien smiled and gently squeezed her little hand. If you don't want to see them, I'll ask someone to chase them away. No need.
Why should we care about them?
We will depart immediately. Arbor raised his head slightly and gave him a calm expression.
All right.
Lien nodded slightly. The two of them held hands and walked out of the room. They summoned the members of the Foam clan and the secret guards and briefly told them about the 20,000 elites that went missing. Does everyone need time to prepare? No, everyone replied in unison. Arbor nodded. She turned around and saw little Taisui, He-chun, and a few others walking out of their rooms. Fairy Ginkgo suddenly flew to Arbor's side and looked at her from head to toe. She smiled and said, Oh, my little sister, Xiao Qiao.
You're really fast this time.
You're already a 5th grade divine master in such a short time. Chapter 40-401. Mu Xingqian felt very tired. Sister advanced too quickly and left him in the dust in a flash. In the future, it would be extremely difficult to catch up with his younger sister's footsteps. His original desire to protect Sister was still very strong even now. However, reality always made him feel a faint trace of sorrow. The young crown princess glanced at Fairy Ginkgo expressionlessly. Is it very fast? It's just SSO. Fairy Ginkgo. Why is this sister suddenly unable to continue the conversation and bafflingly at a loss for words? The atmosphere suddenly froze. Everyone looked at each other in dismay before shifting their gazes to the little stoic's expressionless face. They saw the young crown princess standing in front of them with a calm expression with one hand behind her back. Fairy Ginkgo couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She used her eyes to signal for her sister, the peony fairy, to continue the conversation and break this awkward atmosphere. The peony fairy merely pretended not to see and shifted her gaze to the side. Thankfully, this awkward atmosphere didn't last for more than 3 seconds before Prince Mo inwardly walked up in amusement and grabbed his wife's hand to walk out of the courtyard. Arbor was led a few steps before he suddenly tilted his small head and asked in confusion, Was the atmosphere a bit awkward just now? Lien held back her laughter with difficulty and nodded.
Yes. Why?
Because their advancement speed isn't as fast as JoJo's, Lien said very honestly. JoJo advanced 3 major realms in one day. Since ancient times, there have been numerous deity realm experts. I'm afraid there are only a few who can surpass you.
Oh.
Arbor nodded. Lien twitched her mouth. It's not ordinary at all. So that's why. Arbor nodded in realization. Actually, I could have broken through to deity realm level 6 in one go. But I feel that advancing too quickly isn't a good thing. Arbor turned around and blinked. It's better to leave some energy when appropriate and plan slowly, don't you think so? Lien was having a hard time trying to hold back her laughter, but she had to pretend to be serious. She nodded and praised JoJo for being smart. The little stoic carefully studied his expression. Could it be that you want to laugh?
No.
Prince Mo, who had a strong desire to live, quickly denied it. He shook his head and said, When did I smile? Prince Emo hurriedly changed the topic. Oh right, Jojo. That 10,000-year mermaid Pearl swallowed the black dragon's soul body earlier. Are you okay? Arbor shook his head. What problem can I have? She seemed to have completely forgotten how dangerous the situation had been as she continued to brag. That black dragon's soul has been sealed by the 10,000-year mermaid Pearl. No matter how powerful it is, it won't be able to cause trouble for the time being. Oh, right. She suddenly thought of something and stopped in her tracks. She raised her hand. The faint hum of a sword could be heard in the air. A moment later, the thunderclap sword flew through the air and landed in her hand with a whoosh. Before she fainted, she had left the thunderclap sword on the ground. Emolian had probably picked it up for her. She touched the sword hilt and then put it back into her conscious. The thunderclap sword was a holy weapon, so she naturally didn't need to worry that it would be picked up by someone with ulterior motives. Even if it was picked up, with her powerful divine sense, it was impossible for others to strip off her imprint on the thunderclap sword. Arbor thought for a moment and roughly explained the 10,000-year mermaid Pearl's 3 main functions to Emolian, Heartwarming, and the others. Everyone was naturally surprised. Chapter 4402. Emolian suddenly recalled something and said in realization, "When your soul left your body, hundreds of ghosts gathered in Southern City and tried to invade your body. In the end, they were destroyed by the aurora of heaven and earth in your dantian. Now, it seems like it's the effect of the 10,000-year-old mermaid Pearl. After the 10,000-year-old mermaid Pearl broke its seal, it had been protecting its master's body and doing its best to protect its little master. So what kind of deep hatred did the mermaid Pearl have with the black dragon when it lost control of itself? Seeing that black dragon, he didn't even care about his beloved little master's body. Mother put the mermaid Pearl in my body." Arbor turned to look at Mu Xingqian. Even Big Brother didn't have it. Mu Xingqian couldn't help but laugh. Big Brother is a man. He can protect himself. Mother must have her own reasons for leaving the mermaid Pearl with you. Of course, she has her reasons. Long Qian's cold voice came from the door. When the 10,000-year-old mermaid Pearl enters the body, even a dying person can be pulled back from the gates of hell. Long Qian looked at the little stoic in front of her with a complicated expression. Your mother was hunted down in the lower star region. The battle with the Shuntian prefecture was so intense. How could she not be injured? Arbor looked at the old woman in front of him coldly. He suddenly felt that her wrinkled old face was especially glaring. What do you mean? Emolian coldly interrupted Long Qian's chatter. Shut up. Arbor reached out to pull her sleeve and said calmly, if you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush? Long Qian's icy gaze swept past Emolian, then Ji Chen, before finally settling on Qiao Mu. She stated without the slightest ripple of emotion, if it weren't for this shark pearl, you would have already died prematurely. Do I need to say it clearly? Long Qian took a deep breath and continued, it was the 10,000-year-old mermaid Pearl that saved your life. When you were still an infant, it was the 10,000-year mermaid Pearl that entered your body and pulled you back from the brink of death. You've come back to life, but your body is so weak. You were just an infant back then. You couldn't control this 10,000-year-old shark pearl at all. That's why your mother had no choice but to seal the 10,000-year mermaid Pearl. Arbor's eyes were cold and lonely. He stared at her for a while. Your guess? It's just speculation, but I know your mother. I know all of her thoughts. Long Qian replied calmly. She would do anything for you. As long as it's something that can save you, she would definitely try. How do you think your mother died? Stop talking. Emolian roared in anger. Her face was filled with rage, and her eyes were cold. Without another word, she whipped the black flaming spirit whip towards Long Qian. Grandmother. Long Xiangyun and Long, who could not help but exclaim. Long Qian suddenly reached out and grabbed the flaming spirit whip that was coming towards her. The strong aura of a transcendent god rushed towards her. Her palm was burned by the flaming spirit whip. In an instant, there was a sizzling sound, and her entire palm was burned black. However, she looked at Arbor and Mo Lien with a mocking expression and said coldly, "Your mother died to save you. If she had kept the mermaid pearl, she wouldn't have died so early." "Shut up." Mu Xingchen, He Chun, and the others were furious. "I'll make up for it tomorrow and adjust the time. See you at 4 p.m. Chapter 4403. Long Qian clasped his palms together while a defensive light suddenly emanated from his body, and it was used to resist the force that was being thrown at him simultaneously. Rays of light danced in the air and landed on the old woman's defensive barrier. It shattered with one hit, and it shattered instantly. Long Qian took a few steps back and was sent flying. In the blink of an eye, two green figures passed through the crowd and rushed to Long Qian's side. The two of them moved at lightning speed, grabbing onto Long Qian's arms at the same time, stopping her from flying away. Elder Zhu, elderly, the crowd bowed and greeted them. The two elders must have been alerted by the commotion caused by her advancement, right? Even the two elders were alerted. Seriously, the mermaids and mermen whispered among themselves and secretly looked at Arbor. Mo Lien, He Shurchen, and Mu Xingchen quickly turned to look at Arbor's expression. They wondered if Jojo could handle what Long Qian said. On the other hand, Qiao Mu's expression was unexpectedly calm and collected, but her eyes were still coldly staring at Long Qian. "Let's go." Long Qian was stunned, and so were all the mermaids and mermen. After the Dragon Clan leader said those words, this child actually did not have the slightest reaction. He didn't even have a change in his emotions. "Stop right there," Long Qian shouted. "Mother!" Long Qiyu, who heard the news, ran over as fast as he could while panting. Madame Long had a strange expression on her face, and she looked at Arbor with a strange gaze. "Mother!" Long Qiyu cupped his hands together and bowed to the two elders beside Long Qian. "Elder Zhu, elderly, mother," Long Qiyu said anxiously. "What are you trying to do, mother?" "The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was left behind by our ancestors. Since it chose little sister, it belongs to her. Now that little sister has given it to her own daughter, there is no way to deny it." Long Qian looked at her son coldly. "What do you know? Do you think I'm after the pearl? I'm just telling them the truth. She can't control it. The reason why everything was fine before was because the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was sealed by Chu Yun.
But now?
How could it be the same as before?" Right. A merman immediately called out. "For the sake of this merman pearl, many people have been sacrificed. The mermaid pearl chose First Miss, but not First Miss's daughter. Now that young Miss is dead, the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl should be returned to our merman race. Let's choose another destined person." Yes. Moreover, the shark pearl has devoured our clan's guardian black dragon. It should be returned. Return it. The mermaids and mermen's eyes lit up. They stared at Arbor like wolves and tigers. They had already tossed the matter of Mo Lien and the others injuring Long Qian to the back of their minds. In the face of such tempting benefits, most people would probably throw away their brains. Arbor looked at these ugly faces coldly. He opened his mouth slightly, and a white jade bead as bright as the sun and moon flew out of his mouth. It hung silently in front of her. 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. A young merman stared at the white jade bead with desire. Without saying a word, he was the first to rush forward and reach out to touch the shark pearl. Suddenly, a strong light was emitted from the mermaid pearl. Long Qian's eyelids twitched, and he quickly said, "Back off." However, it was too late. The young merman screamed as the white light covered him. Chapter 4404. Under the illumination of this white light, his entire person disintegrated into snowflake-like fragments, completely dissolving from head to toe. His body and Dao vanished, and his soul was extinguished. Not even the slightest trace of his existence could be found between heaven and earth. Arbor suddenly laughed uproariously. His laughter was calm, clear, and icy. However, Mo Lien, He Shurchen, and the others didn't feel too good about it. The little stoic coolly glanced at Long Qian, who had an unsightly expression. With a wave of her hand, the pure white mermaid pearl landed in her palm. Do you see it? What's the difference? This is the difference. The little stoic's cold voice, simple and clear, landed in the merfolk's ears. If you still don't understand, I might as well tell you clearly. I am the person you said was destined for the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. You can try again if you don't believe me. Arbor held the mermaid pearl in one hand and walked to the other two merfolk without a second thought. You want to try? Or you want to try? The two of them retreated several steps in horror. You don't even have the courage to try, yet you still want the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl? Arbor pushed that person's chest. Are you kidding me? Look at your cowardly faces. I truly feel embarrassed for Ancestor Xuanji. How could she have such ignorant and scoundrel descendants like you? The little stoic turned on her mocking mode, each and every word extremely cutting. If I were Ancestor Xuanji, I would be alive from anger even after I die. Thankfully, she has already passed away, so I don't need to see her ugly and embarrassing faces. Madame Long forced a smile when she saw the atmosphere so stiff.
This child, how can you speak like that?
We didn't understand the situation before. Since the 10,000-year-old mermaid Pearl has chosen you as its destined person, then Arbor raised his hand to stop Madame Long from continuing. He coldly looked at Long Qian and said, "You still want to stop me?" Long Qian remained silent. A mermaid suddenly swam out of the crowd and pointed at Arbor as she scolded harshly. "What do you have to be proud of? Isn't it all because your mother sacrificed her own life to make you who you are now? What else do you think you have without your mother's? Your mother is the eldest daughter of our Wang Chuan Long clan, and she was born in Wang Chuan. Without everything that Wang Chuan gave her, could you have everything that you have now? It's fine if you don't know how to be grateful, but now you're actually speaking rudely to our patriarch. You've forgotten your roots." Behind Arbor stood a row of purple forest guards, and when they heard this, they couldn't help but unsheathe their swords in unison. Arbor looked at her coldly.
Who are you?
Even though the mermaid was a bit afraid, she still said coldly, "You don't deserve to know who I am. If you still have filial piety, you should return the 10,000-years-old mermaid pearl to our merfolk race and tell us the method to tame the mermaid pearl." Ma Yichen sneered. What a righteous speech. Arbor stared coldly at the mermaid in front of him. He held the mermaid pearl in his hand, and the pearl suddenly glowed, instantly forming a thin whip of light. It slithered through the air like a snake and hit the mermaid heavily. The mermaid looked up at Arbor in shock and covered her face with one hand. A shocked expression hung on his face. His entire body had already shattered into pieces of willow catkins. With a bang, he shattered and scattered with the wind. Those who stop me die. Chapter 44:05. The air instantly froze, and it was as if time and space had stopped. Everyone stared in shock at the little stoic standing in front of them. She was enveloped in the light of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl and was emitting a terrifying halo. At this moment, Arbor was exuding a powerful aura from top to bottom. The mermen couldn't help but tremble in fear and be speechless. Several mermen in the front row suddenly felt the ground beneath their feet trembling violently. They looked down and instantly cried out in horror, "The seabed is shaking." It wasn't just the seabed that was shaking. The entire Forgotten River's secret realm was shaking. The seawater above them was also surging violently, as if it would break through the seal at any moment and pour down. "Form the formation!" A young merman screamed in panic. All the mermen hurriedly moved and formed a defensive formation in a fluster to block the fierce little demon god in front of them. Arbor stood in front of them with a cold and heartless expression. His eyes were fixed on Long Qian and the others. The mermaid pearl in her hand released waves of intense light, and the frightening sound of the churning seawater reached their ears. The purple forest guards turned to look and were horrified. They saw a water dragon rising from the depths of the sea, like an angry dragon roaring in the sky. It surged violently and quietly stood behind the little stoic. The dense water spiritual energy around her, bit by bit, slowly spread out, like soldiers setting up a formation, neatly and densely packed, gathering around her. This scene caused everyone's scalp to tingle and their bodies to stiffen. Long Qian was dazed as she stared blankly at the little girl standing in front of her. A complicated emotion flashed through her eyes. With such ability to control water and such a water spiritual technique, no one could continue to deceive themselves and say that the mermaid pearl couldn't be used by her. This child had completely inherited the mermaid pearl's power. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl had been unsealed not long ago, and its water spiritual energy had yet to fully recover. In the future Long Qian didn't dare to imagine. Go, exterminate them. Xiao Mu pointed forward apathetically, and the roaring monstrous waves behind her were like giant dragons ascending to the heavens. They let out a furious roar of the sea as they ferociously attacked the merfolk with a crash. Elder Zhu, and Elder Li jumped in fright. They worked together to form a defensive barrier and roared, "Defend!" Only after colliding with that power would they know how strong it was. Even with two immortal reverends working together, they were still unable to control the surging water spirits. The waterspout that blotted out the sky and covered the earth fiercely whipped the barrier in front of the two elders. The force of the impact made the mermen behind the elder feel extremely defeated. They had a premonition that if the elders were unable to stop the torrential waves, they would very likely end up like the woman from before, shattering under the impact of the waves and turning into snowflakes before disappearing into nothingness. The little stoic, who was slowly walking towards them, was like a queen who controlled the power of the deep sea. She was terrifying and dazzling, causing people to feel fearful. Long Qian's old injuries had yet to heal, and now that she had new injuries, she was truly unable to join forces with the two elders to resist this destructive force. Long Shangyun was supporting her with one hand over her heart. She slowly raised her head and stared at the little stoic who was getting closer and closer. "I knew it a long time ago." Arbor coldly stared at Long Qian and said in an unusually cold voice, "Didn't you ask me if I knew the true cause of Mother's death?" "I know. The moment I saw the mermaid pearl, I knew." Chapter 4406. Long Qian's heart skipped a beat. There was an indescribable feeling in her heart as she stared coldly at her granddaughter. At this moment, it was as if she was looking at her high-spirited, laughing daughter again. Their figures somehow overlapped with each other. No, they didn't look alike at all. Her daughter, Long Chuyun, might have been arrogant when she was young, but she definitely wasn't as cold and unfeeling as the little stoic in front of her. "Didn't you ask me what else I have without my mother?"
Yes.
"Without my mother, I am nothing." Jojo. Mu Xingchen's heart tightened, and he couldn't help but murmur softly. "My life was given to me by my mother. For me, she disregarded her own life and did everything she could to keep me alive." Arbor stared coldly at Long Qian and said in a deep voice, "That is why I have to live well."
Life.
Continue her life and continue her future. Walk my own path and continue my future. Do you know what this is? Arbor stared coldly and mockingly at Long Qian. Long Qian's heart sank and her eyes narrowed. This is called mother-daughter kinship. How would you heartless and unscrupulous people understand? How would you understand? Mother didn't give me life to let me wallow in the past, and she definitely didn't want me to be filled with guilt. You don't understand, Arbor sighed deeply. She only wanted me to live well. There is only hope if you live. There is only a future if you live. Living is so easy to say. Arbor placed his hand over his heart and looked up coldly at Long Qian. I have a clear conscience. I know what I want to do. I understand. You don't understand. Emolian stared at her wife's back with endless tenderness in her eyes. Mu Xingchen's eyes were slightly red, and he pursed his lips tightly as he looked at his sister with relief. Xiao Mu slowly lowered her hand, and the torrential seawater behind her churned up into the sky, engulfing Long Qian and the others like a gigantic curtain of water that blotted out the sky. Seeing that the huge water curtain was about to hit their defensive barrier, they suddenly stopped. The two elders' faces darkened. Their saint powers surged as if they were facing a great enemy, waiting for the power to fall. However, the water curtain shattered bit by bit, disintegrating into wisps of watery mist in front of their eyes, spreading out in all directions and letting out soft, sizzling noises. Long Qian's eyes were already opened wide, and she was just waiting for the attack to arrive. However, the scene before her caused her to be unable to react for a time.
Cousin.
Long Qi felt like he was about to die, and he took a deep breath. He secretly loosened his clenched fists and wanted to say a few more words. Arbor's cold and resolute voice rang clearly in their ears. This is the last time. For the sake of Ancestor Xuanji, I'll let you off. From now on, Arbor has severed all ties with the Forgotten River Dragon clan. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. If there's an invasion, just like this. Xiao Mu swatted over with a backhand palm, and a giant stone lion that was 30 feet away instantly disintegrated into fine powder amidst a flash of white light. Long Qi's eyes widened. He looked at Arbor and then turned to look at his grandmother. Long Qi was deeply affected and had already fainted. Madame Long quickly called for someone to help support him. She looked at Arbor with a complicated gaze. Long Qian also felt a buzzing sound in her ears as she stared coldly at Arbor's back. Chapter 40, 407. The words, "We'll sever all ties and have nothing to do with each other," echoed in her ears. Long Qian couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and her complexion withered even more. Grandmother. Grandmother. Long Shongyun supported Long Qian, and Long Qian also hurried forward to help. After saying that, Xiaomu didn't look at the Dragon Clan clansmen anymore. It was as if looking at them a few more times would dirty her eyes. She turned around and walked toward the city gates with an indifferent expression. Everyone else naturally followed her. Mo Lian and Hechen both paused in their footsteps and turned around simultaneously. One of them released a pitch-black fire spirit, while the other threw out a wood spirit. They were so fast that it was hard to predict. The two forces heavily collided with the two elders. The pitiful two immortal venerables elders had already expended a lot of holy power to set up the defensive array. Now that they were attacked by two people at the same time, how could they withstand it? The two elders were instantly sent flying by this attack. Everyone was aghast as they looked at Mo Lian and Hechen in shock and fear. Two of the strongest elders in their clan were actually no match for the two people beside the little stoic. At this moment, a trace of fear involuntarily rose in the hearts of the merfolk. Fortunately, they didn't attack just now, right? If they were to really fight, would even a tenth of them be able to remain here? Long Qian looked over with a grave expression. Before the Dragon Clan leader could speak, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal took out a small fan and waved it. He smiled and turned to leave with the group. Mo Lian merely glanced at them coldly before following without a word. The group of mermaids and mermen all had cold sweat oozing out of their bodies. They glanced at each other, feeling as if they had just walked through the gate of hell. "Our grandmother. Granddaughter will help you back to rest?" Long Shongyun didn't know why she was stammering and couldn't speak clearly. Long Qian glanced at her and nodded silently. Long Qian couldn't help but sigh deeply. She glanced at the clansmen around her and then at her father, who was being helped away. She massaged her temples as she felt a headache coming on. The situation in Wangchuan was so serious, but the clansmen and the crown princess of the Divine Prefecture parted on bad terms. Let's not talk about working together in the future. It was clearly the River of Forgetfulness that proposed to unite the three continents and cooperate on land and sea. But now it was truly a joke. If the little stoic didn't participate, then perhaps the Zhangzhou and Underworld provinces would also withdraw, right? Long Huan couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Not long after Long Huan returned to his own courtyard, he was called to the study room by his father, Long Qiyu. His father's body had always been frail, and he was bedridden all year round. Now, because of the little stoic's matter, he was overly worried, and his complexion had become increasingly unsightly these past 2 days. When Long Huan saw this, he could only offer a few more words of consolation. Long Qiyu asked, What do you think about the alliance between the sea and the land to break the heavenly fate? Long Huan was silent for a while before he told Long Chu about his thoughts. Cousin has cut off all ties with our Forgotten Creek Dragon clan and has already said so. I think when Long Chu thought of what happened just now, he could not help but feel a burst of heartache. He had always known that his mother, Long Qian, was excessively headstrong and self-opinionated. Once she set her mind on something, she would insist on accomplishing it and would not care about anything else. But he really didn't expect things to turn out like this. Breaking the heavenly fate is the right thing to do, Long Chu said in a deep voice. Why don't you follow the original plan and arrange for Jojo and the others to go to the base on Leisha Island? Chapter 4408. Long Huan couldn't help but smile wryly. Do you think they'll be willing? The little Stoics group must have returned to the Divine Province by now. No, you should go and talk to her. Father, aren't you being too optimistic? Long Huan said helplessly. Cousin has already broken off relations with our Wangchuan Long clan. Breaking off relations with us is a personal matter. Cooperating is for the greater good of the 3 provinces. Long Chu looked distressed. Although father hasn't interacted much with your cousin, I can tell that this child is someone who clearly distinguishes between gratitude and grudges. She won't destroy an alliance against the Heavenly Fate Empire for her own selfish desires. Realization dawned on Long Huan. Although his father's health had always been poor, he knew that his father was a man of great wisdom. All right, father, I'll go find them now. Long Huan inwardly decided that no matter how the people around his cousin beat or scolded him, he would endure it all. Long Chu raised his hand and patted his shoulder. You've been wronged. Long Huan shook his head and forced a smile. Suddenly, a royal guard's report came from outside the courtyard, and Long Huan called him in. What is it? The Crown Princess's group is heading towards the snowy mountain range.
What?
Long Huan was involuntarily startled. Why would they go? Long Huan turned to say to Long Chu, Father, I'll bring people to find them now. Ferocious beasts roamed the depths of the snowy mountain range. Although the little Stoics group had many people and many of them had high cultivations, it would probably be troublesome if they were surrounded by a group of ferocious beasts. Long Chu also nodded quickly. Why are they going there? Oh, that's right, go call Yun'er over, Long Chu added. Long Huan's gaze was a bit complicated, but he still nodded. He turned to walk to the door and called a royal guard over to give him some instructions. That royal guard was taken aback and hastily said, Young Master Ding? He seems to have left with the Crown Princess's group. Long Chu was startled. What happened? Long Huan couldn't help but frown. Was he captured? Or did he follow them himself? Captured? That wasn't very likely. Moreover, he had secretly observed that the little Stoic didn't give Ding Yun any face, so their relationship definitely wasn't good. The guard scratched his head and said, When I came over, I only took a glance. I didn't see clearly whether young Master Ding was caught or left with them voluntarily. Father, I'll go now. What are you going for? Madame Long walked in. Her warm and gentle smile was gone, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She said mockingly, He followed them of his own accord. You're in such a hurry to chase after him. It's as if you care about your son. I've been back for so long, but I've never seen you treat him differently. So it turns out that you didn't dare to show it because of my presence. You're really good at pretending. Madame Long sneered. Long Chu was choked by her words and was a little speechless. Mother. Long Qian looked at his parents awkwardly. As a son, it was difficult for him to be sandwiched between his parents. He couldn't help his mother criticize his father, so he just stood there awkwardly. What's wrong with you now?
What about me?
Tell me what's wrong with me. What, you Long Chu, hid it from me for so many years and secretly gave birth to a son outside, yet I can't tell you. Long Chu originally wanted to speak, but he was stopped by a violent cough. Father. Long Huan hastily went up and handed him a cup of water. I'm not done yet. Wait a moment. Chapter 4409. Long Qiu drank a mouthful of water and calmed his breathing. Only then did he open his mouth to speak. Haven't I already explained this matter to you? I didn't know that Zian, you still call her so affectionately. A trace of disgust flitted across Madame Long's eyes. Back then, if I hadn't acted first and went to reason with that bitch Ding Zian, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Long Qiu, who do you think should sit on Madame Long's seat today? Long Qiu naturally lost face after being scolded by his wife in front of his son. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Unreasonable. Then, he turned and entered the inner hall without another word, unwilling to speak with Madame Long anymore. Madame Long turned to look at the embarrassed Long Huan. Huan, you must be tired from running around these days. Rest well at home and don't go anywhere. Long Huan hurriedly said, But mother. No buts. Madame Long pulled her son away. What does that brat Ding Yun's life or death have to do with you? Just let him stir up trouble with the divine province's crown prince. When the time comes, others can't stand him and will naturally chase him back. But Long Huan was dragged out by Madame Long, and he rubbed his forehead with a headache. Sometimes, when a woman is unreasonable, no one can persuade her. Mu Xingchen nudged Mo Lian's elbow and glanced at the railing. His younger sister was sprawled on the railing alone, gazing at the clear water and blue sky as dusk deepened. It had already been almost an hour. Are we really not going to talk to her? Mo Lian glanced sideways at him and shook her head slightly. Let her have some time alone. He understood his Qiao too well. No matter how resolute her words were, today, she had broken off all ties with the Wang Chuan dragon clan and her mother's family. Now that she had come to this point, she would definitely not feel good in her heart. Mu Xingchen sighed. When he looked up, he saw Xigong Fuling and Ding Yun walking over side by side. Young Master Ding, Miss Xigong. Mu Xingchen stood up and gave them a seat. Mo Lian looked up at the two of them casually. Why is there only tea and no wine? Young Master Ding sat down with a smile, took a teacup and poured himself a cup of tea. Mo Lian looked at him deeply. You must have heard of my mother, Ding Zian. Ding Yun smiled and drank the tea in one gulp. He put down the cup and looked towards Mo Lian. I had an ill-fated relationship with Long Qiu when I was young. That's how I came to be the elegant and carefree young master. Eldest brother. Xigong Fuling could not stand his tone of self-amusement and glanced at him in displeasure. Good, Ding Yun said with a smile. As a son, I naturally can't interfere in my parents' past. Anyway, I'm quite familiar with this area. I didn't lie to you. When I was young, my mother brought me here to stay for a while. At that time, I was still young and didn't know anything. I didn't know why we had to stay in this cold and wet place surrounded by water. I only found out later. Waiting for someone, especially waiting for someone for the rest of one's life, is such a difficult thing. Young Master Ding smiled faintly in self-mockery. Xigong Fuling turned to look at him, her eyes flickering slightly. What's with your expressions? Young Master Ding retracted his gaze and looked at Mo Lian, Mu Xingchen, and the others. He laughed and said, Don't pity me. Chapter 4410. Mo Lian rolled her eyes at him and got straight to the point. What do you think is on the island? A barrier. A barrier? It's that kind of ancient natural barrier. Ding Yun nodded and said, There's a problem with the space. Otherwise, how could 20,000 elites disappear without a trace? That's right. Even if someone launched a sneak attack with so many people, it should be earth-shattering. Mu Xingchen nodded, deeply finding it reasonable. Mo Lian responded with a "MHM." He suddenly stood up and floated to Arbor's side in a flash, reaching out to support her body. His movements were light and gentle, and his phoenix eyes seemed to overflow with gentleness. Mu Xingchen rolled his eyes at his back and grumbled, Didn't you just say not to disturb her and let her have some peace and quiet? In the end, he floated over himself in less than a quarter of an hour. Mo Lian naturally heard his brother-in-law's grumbling, but He was disinclined to retort. Although he was sitting here talking to Ding Yun and the others, his gaze kept drifting towards Jojo. When he saw the little fellow lying on the railing and nodding her big head, he knew she was dozing off. He hastily floated over to support her. When he looked down and saw that the little stoic was already drowsy and half awake, he couldn't resist chuckling. Mu Xingchen also hastily moved over. Younger sister, she's been tired from the day. I'll take her to rest. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Oh, eldest brother-in-law replied dryly. Mo Lian lifted the little stoic up bridal style and briskly walked towards the stairs. Sikong Fuling silently glanced at them and reflexively looked at her elder brother's expression. However, she saw her elder brother's deep gaze, but didn't say a word. Just as Mo Lian reached the steps next to the stairs, he suddenly dodged to the side and lifted his leg to kick something. That thing was like a ball as it flew far away and landed softly on the table in front of Mu Xingchen. Mu Xingchen looked down, and his expression abruptly changed. He stood up and summoned his sword from his conscious. It's that dragon.
What?
Sikong Fuling jumped in fright and hastily dodged behind him. Is it the blood-patterned black dragon that fought with the black dragon at the bottom of the sea? That blood-patterned black dragon left a deep impression in everyone's mind. The battle between the two dragons and the might of the holy beast was still fresh in everyone's minds. Everyone looked at the dragon lying on the table in astonishment. It was as long as a forearm and as thick as a finger. It looked like a worm, completely lacking the might of a black dragon. After being kicked by Mo Lian earlier, it was still lying limply on the ground, unable to catch its breath. Everyone was speechless as they turned to look in Mo Lian's direction. That old man didn't even look at Shui Wenlong as he carried his chow up the stairs and left. Everyone looked sympathetically at the goods lying on the table. Which corner did you crawl out from? Mu Xingchen withdrew the sword in his hand, thinking that he had been too nervous just now. They had seen this blood-patterned dragon with their own eyes. It seemed to have flown out of their little sister's inner world. Was it their little sister's personal sacred beast? What's wrong with you? Sikong Fuling couldn't help but ask, feeling that the little worm was a little pitiful. She raised her head and looked at the people in front of her with her watery eyes, ignoring them. Following that familiar feeling in its memory, it wriggled down to the ground and swam in the direction of Arbor. Hungry, so hungry, master. I'm hungry. Everyone was speechless as they watched this fellow wriggle up the stairs and chase after Arbor with tears in its eyes. See you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Chapter 40, 411. Sikong Fuling stared at it in astonishment for a moment before rubbing her nose. It can't be that it's so hungry that it can only crawl, right? Mu Xingchen glanced at her and was momentarily speechless. Miss Sikong, you really know how to joke. Hearing that, Sikong Fuling silently glanced at Mu Xingchen and coughed awkwardly. That was true. She had indeed never heard of a holy beast being half-starved to death. This should be their misconception. Hungry, so hungry, master. Hungry. Arbor abruptly sat up, and his movements were so large that he almost flipped off the bed. A pair of large hazy eyes met with Mo Lian, who was sitting at the table and looking at him. For a moment, he was at a loss and didn't know where he was. Mo Lian couldn't help but want to laugh. She quickly walked forward, lifted her clothes, and sat down by the bed. He raised his hand to hold her small hand. How is it?
Who's calling me?
Arbor looked sternly at the crown prince and extended a finger to point in the direction of the door. Outside the door. Mo Lian secretly ground her teeth, but still got up as instructed. She walked to the door and raised her hand to push it open. Sure enough, a slender little thing slithered in and rushed toward its master's bed with teary eyes. Master. Arbor sat up cross-legged and sized up the little fellow that was climbing up. This slender little thing had vertical blood patterns carved on its back and a pair of small horns on its head. Arbor seemed to see 3 little dragons above the sparkling lake, churning and spitting fire as they spun up and down. Each of the 3 little dragons had a pair of dragon horns on their foreheads, and their blood-red bodies meandered upward. The flames they spat out were also blood-red. When the flames touched the lake, a sizzling sound was heard, and a small part of the lake water completely evaporated. "Come back! How dare you make such a fuss? So disobedient. Watch as this little ancestor draws the Fushi sword and beheads you." Arbor's gaze was distant as he looked at the thing that crawled along the bed and finally reached her knees with great difficulty. She couldn't help but let out a faint chuckle as she gently stroked the little dragon's head. It turned out that this troublesome blood-marked demonic dragon had been sealed in her inner world all this time. The snake sculpture in her inner world was not a snake sculpture. It was a blood-patterned demonic dragon. She had hatched the 3 blood-patterned demonic dragons with great difficulty. Even now, he could still remember the scene where the scarlet blood flame touched the lake water and turned it into steam. This little bit of fire could burn down mountains, rivers, sun, and moon. It was quite fierce. The little stoic's eyes rippled with gentleness, and her small hand stroked Xiaolong's head, but her thoughts drifted off somewhere. "Xiao Bao, no matter where you go, Master will definitely look after you. Time and space are not a problem. As long as you miss me, just call me. I will definitely hear you." Xiao Mu blinked lightly before looking up at Imo Lian, who had stopped in his tracks and was gazing at her. She smiled brightly, her eyes crinkling. "I'm hungry." Imo Lian quickly stepped forward and gently pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "What do you want to eat?" "I want to eat something sweet. Bean paste cake, pineapple jelly, coconut cup, hibiscus crisp, anything is fine." "Okay." Imo Lian reached out to support her shoulders and looked down at the blood-patterned demonic dragon circling around the little girl's legs. "I didn't expect this to be a dragon that likes to eat sweet things. Little Red can't fly when it's hungry." Arbor stroked Xiaolong's head, her voice rueful. Imo Lian raised her brows. "Little Red?" Chapter 40:412. Arbor nodded. "Speaking of which, it actually has 2 younger brothers. It's called Little Red, second brother is called Little Red, and third brother is Little Red." Prince Mo's expression was a bit indescribable. The Crown Prince glanced at Little Red sympathetically and coughed lightly. "But isn't it a black dragon?" Even Little Black sounded better than Little Red. She was so feminine, just like a brothel worker who did odd jobs, but it has scarlet blood tattoos all over its body. The little girl argued with reason and glanced at the Crown Prince. "Do you think this name isn't good? I've been calling it this since a very, very long time ago." The Crown Prince immediately shook his head without any integrity. No, Jojo's name is really good." This lousy dragon didn't express any objections. It wasn't like he had nothing better to do than argue with his wife over a trivial matter. "This name is naturally good." Arbor nodded. "Just like me and my younger sister and brother. Arbor, Qiao Lin, Qiao Sun, you can tell they're blood-related siblings from the sound of it. Blood-related and inseparable. Just from the name, you can tell they're family." Yes. Prince Imo nodded helplessly. He went up to hug his wife and kissed her hard. "Wife, do you still want to drink sweet soup? Date and longan soup?" The little girl's eyes brightened. The smile on Prince Mo's lips widened wantonly. When he looked down, he saw that lousy dragon's round eyes also brightening. This little expression was exactly the same as its master's. Songzhou's Liu pass ever since His Majesty personally arrived 3 days ago and took down the bandit leader with a single arrow. The morale of the Middle Army had been greatly boosted. After many days of extermination and encirclement, the bandit groups were forced to flee into the depths of the mountains and forests. Duan Yu ordered to surround the mountains and kill them one by one. "Who are you? You've been sneakily spying on us." A young man in black riding beside Duan Yu turned his head to take a look. He saw 2 soldiers pushing and shoving a person whose face could not be seen clearly. That person cried out, "Hey, let go, quickly let go. My shoulder is about to be broken by you." When Duan Yu heard the familiar voice, he glanced to the side and raised his hand slightly. The black-clothed youth said, "Release him." The 2 soldiers loosened their grip and pushed the man in front of them. With a thud, Wu Ruome's knee hit the ground heavily, causing her to grimace in pain. Wui, send her back. Duanyu swept her a glance before turning to leave. Wu Ruome hurriedly shouted, Hey, wait. Your Majesty, I came here this time to report an official matter. I'm not fooling around. The black-clothed youth had already dismounted and walked to young Miss Wu's side. Just as he was about to take this troublesome young Miss Wu away, he heard her repeatedly shout, Big matter. I have the letter can prove it. Duanyu waved his hand and had someone present the letter in her hand. After skimming through it, his gaze landed on her deeply. Does your father know about this matter? Wu Ruome scratched her head with a mischievous grin. My father, he probably doesn't know. Duanyu expressionlessly glanced at her. If you don't use a messenger talisman, you'll have to run back and forth for several days and nights. By the time you tell him about this matter, it's already out of control. Wu Ruame looked at him in bewilderment and cautiously asked, Your Majesty already knew? She thought she had gathered a big piece of news from the streets. Chapter 44:13. Duanyu ignored her and turned his horse to leave. He said, Send her back to the Prime Minister's estate. Then, why hasn't His Majesty returned to the capital after such a major incident? Wu Ruame was a bit perplexed and hastily asked. Wu Yi gruffly pulled her up. All right. You don't need to meddle in His Majesty's affairs. Why should a woman like you meddle in so many men's affairs? Wu Ruame pushed Wu Yi back. So, what if I'm a woman? Wu Yi couldn't help but be amused. Nothing if I'm a woman. It's just that you Wu Ruame suddenly summoned her long sword from her conscious. Unsheath your sword. I want you to pay the price for this. The surrounding onlookers. Wu Yi twitched his mouth and rolled his eyes while crossing his arms. I never raise a hand against women. Are you looking down on us women? Let me tell you, someone like you won't last more than 100 moves in the hands of Commandery Princess Wushuang. He didn't expect this eldest miss of the Prime Minister's estate to hold Commandery Princess Wushuang in such high esteem. This degree of blind adoration could rival that of a moron. All right, stop making a fuss. His Majesty is busy with proper business. How am I making a fuss? Wu Ruame retorted angrily. I came to help him suppress the bandits and deliver important news to him while I'm at it. By the time your news arrives, the incident will have already happened. Wu Yi couldn't help but laugh. He grabbed Wu Ruame and walked towards the carriage parked at the side. He directly threw Wu Ruame into the carriage and instructed the coachman, bring some people and safely escort Miss Wu back to the estate. Yes. Wu Ruame was flustered and exasperated as she clung to the carriage frame and pounded on the wooden planks. Hey, punk, you still haven't told me. Did His Majesty already know about the second prince's ulterior motives? Wu Yi didn't answer her and only threw her a look that said, Figure out yourself. Giddy up. The coachman swung his whip and jolted Wu Ruame back into the carriage. She cursed the entire way back. I'll still be back. Don't think of stopping my ambition to be a female general. Wu Yi couldn't help but facepalm. It was no wonder that the Prime Minister always had an indescribable look on his daughter's face when he saw her. Any father who met her would feel stifled. That night, Duanyu led his troops to a nearby barren mountain and captured all the remaining bandits in one fell swoop. At dawn, Ing silently appeared beside him, bowed, and said, The second prince's people have started to move. Duanyu glanced back. Amidst the warm mist, rows of green-clothed puppets with cold and sharp expressions stood before him. These people were the assassins that the second prince and the third prince had hired from Joe City. At that time, after being captured by his people one by one, they were all turned into puppets. Now they could be put to good use. That third royal brother of Zhen's really didn't make a move? Duanyu's eyes flickered. He seemed to have thought of something, and his expression appeared somewhat regretful. These useless brothers of his only knew how to eat, drink, and play all day long. They were all useless, and raising them was really a waste of money. He really wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of his second and third brothers in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, his third brother usually appeared to be a rash and impetuous person, but this time, he had some brains and didn't participate in this from beginning to end. He really couldn't find a good reason to capture him for any random reason. Duan Yu couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 44:14. If he didn't leave the city, how would second royal brother dare to make a move? After dilly-dallying at Liu Pass for several days, it was time to set off for the capital. He really wanted to see what this second brother of his could do under his nose. Your Majesty, 8th young Master Qi is here. Duan Yu raised his brows and looked back. He saw an elegant and handsome man in white walking over like a gust of wind between two rows of soldiers. Following behind him was a slender woman with a white veil covering her face, revealing only a pair of beautiful eyes. Duan Yu's gaze only landed on that 8th young Master Qi, and didn't notice that woman. Her pair of beautiful eyes only stared deeply at him. Greetings, Your Majesty. 8th young Master Qi Rui bowed in a very standard manner. The woman following behind him took 2 steps forward and bowed in greeting. This subject, Qi Liren, greets Your Majesty. A strategist beside Duan Yu leaned closer and whispered, "Third miss of the Qi family." Duan Yu swept that woman a non-committal glance and nodded. No need to be so courteous. 8th Qi. Duan Yu got straight to the point and asked this 7th young Master Qi, "How is the matter we asked you to consider?" 8th young Master Qi quickly bowed again. "It is my Qi family's honor to be able to take responsibility for the country. 8th Qi is willing to follow Your Majesty and serve you faithfully." Duan Yu wasn't surprised by 8th young Master Qi's attitude at all, and only nodded. "Okay. In that case, you will follow us from now on." Duan Yu paused and turned to look at Qi Liren behind 8th young Master Qi. Her 8th young Master Qi looked a bit embarrassed. When his family heard that he was coming to have an audience with His Majesty today, they insisted on shoving third sister over, and insisted that he bring her along. He had already said that His Majesty was not interested in this kind of thing, but that unreliable father of his still insisted that he bring third sister along. He couldn't find any other excuse at this time. Third sister is the most talented person in our Qi family. 8th young Master Qi smiled awkwardly. To outsiders, everyone only knows that my talisman skills are outstanding, but third sister is actually slightly better than me. At this point, even a fool would understand that the Qi family still wanted this third miss to stay by His Majesty's side. Duan Yu's expression was aloof as he shook his head. Third Miss Qi has the heart to serve the country, which is commendable. There is a difference between men and women. I do not need a woman to follow me for the time being. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Qi Liren was stunned, but she wasn't angry. She said slowly, "I heard that Your Majesty has a female physician with superb medical skills by your side. Her name is Tu Xiuxiu." 8th young Master Qi quickly turned his head and winked at the third Miss, Qi Liren. Third elder sister's words were like a slap to His Majesty's face. His Majesty had just said that he would not have any female attendants by his side, and now he was slapped in the face by Qi Liren. Duan Yu glanced at 8th young Master Qi. Physician 2 is married. Everyone was speechless. What did that mean? Does His Majesty discriminate against unmarried women? However, Duan Yu recalled that day at the foot of Mount Daxing, when Physician 2 knelt in front of him and said, Tu Xiuxiu only wishes to have the opportunity to come into contact with people from the military and investigate her husband, who disappeared from the military 6 years ago. Whether he lived or died, Tu Xiuxiu only wanted to know the final result so that she could be at ease. Could Tu Xiuxiu be the same as other women? Of course, she was different. Duan Yu didn't say anything else and turned to order, return to the capital. Qi Liren took 2 steps forward and shouted at his departing figure, "I will make you see me in a different light." Chapter 44:15. The boat docked on the shore, and everyone followed closely, stepping onto the beach covered in a thick layer of snow. Arbor casually put away scarlet firmament waves and looked around. It was a vast and empty island. At a glance, it was completely barren. It felt as if one could see the end of it with a single glance. This area of barren islands was connected to the sacred land of the snowy mountains, and they all had the same landscape. Due to the low temperature, the island was practically barren, and it was a vast expanse of whiteness everywhere. The snow creaked when they stepped on it. The closer they got to the center of the island, the heavier the snow became. Everyone followed the little girl closely and gradually discovered that the little stoic was forcefully leaving 2 rows of small footprints as if she was walking very happily. This was truly too obvious. Everyone's cultivation was able to walk on snow without leaving a trace. Yet this fellow purposely left a small hole with each step, trying to pull her calf out of the snow pit, sinking it again, pulling it out again. Young Sir Ding couldn't resist chuckling. Could it be that you didn't play with snowmen when you were young? The little stoic ignored him and continued walking on her own path, one step at a time. Her small hand lifted her skirt several inches, leaving a small footprint with each step, and she continued walking forward. When she was young, her sect was covered in snow all year round. Murong Sun held her hand as they walked on the snowy mountains, leaving behind 2 rows of footprints. The little stoic chased after her footprints and forcefully stepped on them. When everyone saw that she was having so much fun by herself, their childlike instincts involuntarily arose, and they followed the little stoic's footsteps everywhere. Before long, they trampled the pure white snow into a mess, leaving behind footprints everywhere. The little stoic suddenly stopped and turned around to ask, "Why isn't there a trace of human habitation when 20,000 people are gathered here?" 20,000 people wasn't a small number. Even if they were all experts with cultivations above the 12th level of the spiritual realm, it would be fine if they walked on the snow without leaving a trace, but it was impossible for 20,000 people to walk without leaving a trace, right? Young Sir Ding smiled and slowly walked forward while stepping on the snow. "Follow me." The little stoic raised her foot and hesitated for less than a second before following closely. She glanced at young Sir Ding. "You really lived here when you were young? I've never lied to you." Ding Yin turned his head and gazed deeply at her. Arbor snorted and jumped forward.
You were so small back then.
How could you survive on a deserted island like this? Have you eaten sea fish before? Young Master Ding turned his head and asked. It's fishy, bland, tasteless. I ate it for 3 years. Xiao Mu abruptly looked at him, and her heart shuddered. This Ding Xian was truly a lunatic. It was one thing for her to suffer, but why did she have to drag her own son into it? This woman really didn't know how to dote on her son. I was 4 years old then. It tastes terrible. Ding Yin turned to look at her again and smiled devilishly. Sigh, it wasn't until I was 7 that I realized that in this world, there are so many things that are more delicious than sea fish. The little stoic halted her steps. You? I live on this island. Something like that. Ding Yin shrugged. I don't remember clearly. The deserted islands here were all the same. There's snow everywhere, weeds and withered vines everywhere. The little stoic looked like she wanted to say something, but in the end, she glanced at him and didn't speak again. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Prince Emma walked side by side and followed behind them from a distance. Everyone was a cultivation expert, so even though they were separated by a certain distance, they could hear everything very clearly. Do you want to ask me if I hate Long Chuyu? Chapter 40, 416. Arbor stole a glance at him with a serious expression on his little face. He did not reveal his gossip-loving Job character at all. His little face was serious, indicating that it was up to him to say it or not. Young Master Ding walked forward slowly, a smile on his lips. It would be a lie if I said I didn't hate him. It's just that I thought I hated him very much. Who would have thought that when I saw him again, he shrugged helplessly. It seems like that's all there is to it. You're right. I feel nothing. That's how I feel when I see Long Chuyu. Not feeling anything is the greatest feeling. Arbor glanced sideways at young Master Ding, wanting to say something but hesitating.
Why?
Are you trying to comfort me? Arbor rolled his eyes coldly at him. You're thinking too much. He took a step forward and stomped his foot down, creating a small hole in the ground. The venerable peach blossom immortal waved his little golden fan and smiled faintly. Everyone has their own story. Jojo loves to listen to stories. It's really not a good habit. With her curious nature, she would be abducted by someone sooner or later. Mo Lien glanced sideways at him. What are you trying to say? The venerable peach blossom immortal gestured with his chin at her and glanced at young Master Ding in front. Jojo wants to talk to him. Then let's talk. The venerable peach blossom immortal snorted. You're really generous. She knows what she's doing. The venerable peach blossom immortal could not help but roll his eyes. He continued to slander her. Unfortunately, we don't know if others know what they're doing. Mo Lien glanced sideways at him. A ruthless little Mo Lien jumped out of her heart. She used the hammer in her hand as if she was playing whack-a-mole. Thump, 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 thump. She hammered 18 times in a row. She hammered eldest Qin, Omega Kotoku Ding Yun Mingyasi Yuan Shurchen, Feng Chongqing, and a bunch of other people who kept popping out of the pit. Especially the Feng clansmen who had been indoctrinated by Feng Hepping into the concept of boy toys. Mo Lien held a small hammer and hammered Feng Chongqing and Feng Chongfei's 2 big heads. Who asked you to marry Jojo? I'll beat you to death. Beat you to death. When the venerable peach blossom immortal saw that he did not speak, he could not help but cast a sideways glance at him, only to see him staring at him with a strange expression. What's with that look? Mo Lien turned her head without a word and walked away. After taking a few steps, she couldn't help but cover her face with her hand. How could he have such a strange and childish idea? Wait, why did it feel like something was missing from the gopher hole? Husband. Peach Blossom. Arbor suddenly turned around and waved at them. There seems to be a boundary here. We can't pass through it. Be careful. There's something strange about the space on this island. Mo Lien and Heichin floated in her direction one after the other. Suddenly, they saw the layer of snow under the little stoic's feet abruptly collapse, and she instantly plummeted downwards. Young Master Ding, who was standing closest to her, subconsciously reached out to grab her wrist, trying to pull her up. However, Jojo's speed of descent was too fast, so he grabbed empty air. Anxious, he jumped down without thinking. Jojo, Mo Lien, and Heichin were both alarmed. Oh no, there seems to be a spatial formation here. Feng Chongqing cried out in alarm. Everyone, be careful. Just as he finished speaking, a few people suddenly fell into the snow hole in the ground. Miss Sikong. Mu Xingchen turned around and saw that Sikong Fulling's feet had loosened. Just as she was about to rise into the air, everyone saw a withered vine shoot out from the ground and coil around her feet. Mu Xingchen reached out to grab her arm. Abruptly, he felt an irresistible force, and he also plummeted downwards with Sikong Fulling. Chapter 40, 417. Xiao Mu knew that things were bad, but before she could break free and fly up, she felt an extremely majestic force dragging her small body down the entire way. As soon as she fell, she knew that there was indeed something wrong with this space. In reality, she didn't fall into any snow pit. She was probably pulled in by the mutated space here. The deserted island near the Snow Ridge Holy Land should be filled with natural space barriers and traps, as Ding Yun said. Qiu, what will happen if I hide in the star domain now? Master Silver, why don't you hide in here and eat something before continuing to fall? Arbor chuckled with a fake smile. Was Qiu not joking? But it was true. There was no use hiding in there now. She would still appear where she went in. If she wanted to fall, she had to continue falling. Therefore, there were many things that were useless to hide. She still had to face what she had to face. Based on your guess, how long more will I fall? I don't know, Master. The tree man who was watching the show had a large basin of pills in front of him and was throwing them into his mouth. To be honest, the little tree man didn't feel anxious at all. After all, she was his master. She was already a peak level 5 God Realm cultivator. How could she be troubled by such a small matter? While munching, Chiyo said, "Master, don't worry. You'll fall to your destination eventually. Pay attention to your defense. Open your defensive barrier. If it doesn't work, I'll set up a wood spiritual barrier for you. Master and Silver will protect you. Go, go, go. Master, go." Arbor. She really didn't want to talk to it right now. Arbor waved her finger. Several defensive talismans floated around her and instantly formed a small defensive talisman formation around her. She continued to fall, but she could feel that the speed of her fall seemed to have weakened a lot. "Master, young Master Ding also jumped down with you just now." Chiyo didn't mind watching the show and gloated. It's a pity that this space is very strange. As soon as he jumped down, he seemed to have been led astray into another passage. Arbor ignored it. She felt that she had fallen for a quarter of an hour before she saw a ray of light below. She took out a gravity talisman and slapped it on herself. Xiaomu's body sank in midair, and when she looked down, she saw a stretch of jade-colored grass below her. The wind blew the grass and leaves, and everything was green. Stepping on the soft grass, Arbor pursed his lips and remained silent for a while. Then he stretched out his fingers again and stuck a few defensive talismans on himself. Master Silver, do you feel unwell?" Arbor raised his hand and summoned an ordinary spiritual sword from his inner world. He gently stirred the grass in front of him and walked forward expressionlessly. He didn't feel any discomfort, but he felt discomfort everywhere. It was very likely that the scene of green grass in front of him was just an illusion. Perhaps, wherever she walked, there would be mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Out of caution, the little stoic was willing to wrap herself in several layers of defensive barriers. She didn't want her skin to come into contact with anything around her. Master, do you want Chiyo to come out and accompany you?" Arbor was silent for a while before he said, "No need." "All right, then Chiyo will cook noodles for Master. If Master is hungry later, you can come in and eat." Arbor thought about it and nodded. Okay. She knew that Master would definitely pay attention to her when it came to food. Chapter 44:18. Chiyo jumped down happily, then turned around and went to work. Xiaomu walked for about half an hour in this expanse of lush green grass before finally stopping. Looking back, everything was still filled with an emerald color. Turning around and looking forward, the fragrant grass stretched to the heavens and the earth, as if there was no end in sight. Arbor leaped into the air and looked into the distance, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. As far as her eyes could see, there was still green grass. There seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. She landed on the ground and sat cross-legged, her beautiful brows furrowed slightly. Right now, the situation was like a turtle trapped in a jar. It was as if it was completely trapped within the spatial barrier. However, she did not know where this domain was, and for the time being, she could not find a way to break this barrier. Arbor looked up at the sky. There were no clouds in the sky, and it was a clear blue. Who would have thought that they would be able to see such pure blue light in a domain like this? Since she was already here, Arbor was not in a hurry. She waved her hand and brought out the bowl of vegetables and meat noodles that Chiyo had cooked. "Master, do you have any plans after finishing this bowl of noodles? Why don't you let Chiyo try and see if it can break this barrier?" Arbor slowly picked up her chopsticks and put it into her mouth expressionlessly. She did not say anything. Chiyo was familiar with her personality. When she was thinking, she did not like to respond to anyone. Thus, she said to herself, "Just now, the great crown prince and his excellency, Heichin, contacted me, but I could not drag them in directly. This shows that the surrounding space is very strange. The people who seem to be around us may be separated by thousands of mountains and oceans." Xiaomu was sitting on a small, sparkling golden stool. She held her bowl of noodles in her hands and ate mouthful by mouthful. "Master?" Arbor raised her head slightly, only to see the scenery in front of her wavering slightly. Two tall and straight figures appeared in the air in front of her. Looking at the situation, the two of them were walking in a cave. On the stone wall, There were a few twisting black snakes with scarlet eyes that slowly slithered down the wall. Suddenly, one of the snakes shot out. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. With a flick of his finger, a stream of energy pierced through the snake's head and split it into two. Soon after, the shadow faded away. Like water ripples, it slowly rippled. Arbor's chopsticks paused for a moment before she continued eating her noodles. After finishing the broth, she tossed the empty bowl to Chio-Chio. Master, the Crown Prince is with the Peach Blossom Immortal Venerable. You don't have to worry, Arbor said expressionlessly. When have I ever worried about them? Then why didn't you say anything earlier? Chio-Chio said, feeling wronged. She thought that her master was in a bad mood because she was separated from the Crown Prince and was worried about her husband. That's because you are too noisy. I don't want to talk to you, Arbor said bluntly. Chio-Chio was immediately speechless. Could it be? Was it being despised by its little master? Arbor put away the small golden stool she had prepared and stood up. She patted the non-existent dust off her clothes. The defense talisman array covering her body was faintly discernible, its talisman power seemingly about to dissipate. Arbor did not hesitate to slap a few more defense talismans on herself and walked forward. I don't know when this will end, Chio-Chio said softly. Chio-Chio said in a small voice, Master, why don't we burn all the grass here and see? Can you burn this area? Arbor said indifferently. We don't even know how big this place is. Chapter 40, 419. What should I do if my power runs out after burning halfway? Feeling stifled, Chio-Chio shut its mouth. A moment later, it said, Then what should we do, Master? We'll take it one step at a time. Xiao Mu indifferently looked ahead. With a flick of her sleeve, a large swarm of poison-tailed butterflies flowed out from between her fingers and scattered in all directions. At the same time, Emolian and Yuan Shurchen were also standing in the cave, gazing with deep eyes at the phantom that appeared in midair for an instant and then disappeared immediately. They watched as Arbor released a swarm of poison-tailed butterflies to search for the barrier. The two of them exchanged a look. What do you think is strange about this space? Everything is strange. Yuan Shurchen put away his little golden fan and turned to wink at Emolian. But the way Jojo expressionlessly ate noodles just now was so interesting. Emolian stepped forward without another word, not even bothering to roll her eyes at him. Your sister is really a weirdo. Seacombe Fulling held a meat bun in one hand and fiercely tore into it. She often carries hot soup and hot noodles in her personal inner world. She doesn't forget to bring enough food when she comes out for training. Seacombe Fulling was currently sitting cross-legged on a round log and chewing hard on the meat bun in her mouth. Compared to my sister, I think you're also quite a weirdo. Mu Xingqian stood on the other end of the log and gazed at the bubbling blood pool around them. You can actually eat a meat bun in this kind of blood pool and sea of corpses? If you're not a weirdo, then what are you?
Ha!
Seacombe Fulling directly swept away a withered white claw that was clinging to the log with the hilt of her sword. How am I a weirdo? She looked down at the bun in her hand. What do you think these surroundings are? I'm telling you, they're all illusions. The smell of rotting corpses you smell, and the blood pool and sea of corpses you see before you actually don't exist. To put it bluntly, this space is just for us to imagine for ourselves. Whatever you imagine will appear around you. In addition, you saw that expressionless face just now because you were thinking about her. That's why she appeared in front of us. In fact, she is isolated in another sealed space, which may be thousands of miles away from here. As he spoke, bubbles suddenly appeared in the blood pool. Suddenly, a few blood crocodiles with their mouths wide open jumped out and bit at the logs under their feet. Mu Xingqian was startled. His long sword flew out from his conchus with a whoosh and immediately chopped off the head of a blood crocodile. Seacombe Fulling's attack was not weak either. In a flash, she stabbed the other blood crocodile back into the pool of blood that was seething with flowers of blood. My mother, Seacombe Fulling wailed. Mu Xingqian couldn't help but roll his eyes. So may I ask, Miss Seacombe, What exactly were you thinking when you came in here? He had already said that the surrounding environment was an illusion created by his imagination. Why couldn't he control his unrestrained thoughts? My heavens, Sikong Fulling exclaimed. In all honesty, I didn't think of anything at all. I really wasn't thinking of anything just now. Sikong Fulling suddenly felt her hair stand on end. She turned her head in unison with Mu Xingchen and saw a sinister dragon head emerge from the rippling pool of blood. Mu Xingchen exclaimed in shock. You?
You.
Why are you thinking of that black dragon again? Chapter 44:20. I wasn't thinking about that black dragon, Sikong Fulling complained incessantly, her face already scrunched up into a ball. She fiercely slapped the back of her head, wishing for nothing more than to slap herself. Who told you to run your mouth off and let your thoughts run wild and wanton? Why did you think of that dragon in that damn stoic face's dream? This fellow recalled in horror that she indeed rejoiced for a split second in her heart just now. Thank goodness, it was only a few blood crocodiles that weren't too big or too small, and not that violent black dragon in the Tsundra little stoic's dream. In the end, she seemed to have met a tragic end right away. Hurry and paddle, Mu Xingchen. Sikong Fulling couldn't care that much anymore and directly used her long sword as an oar to paddle the bloody water in the pool. However, the log seemed to have suddenly lost control and kept spinning back and forth in the center of the bloody water. Mu Xingchen lifted her up, kicked the log aside, and fled in the air. Hurry and recall that black dragon in your head. Are you stupid, Mu Xingchen? Sikong Fulling was so angry that she repeatedly kicked her legs while being carried in his hand. She shouted angrily, Don't tell me you don't know? Summoned things can't disappear unless it's destroyed.
Roar.
That pitch-black and extremely malevolent black dragon finally burrowed out of the bloody pool. It leaped into the air and chased after the two of them. Think of something good. Mu Xingchen couldn't resist roaring. Defend, defensive shield. Sikong Fulling's mind was a mess when she saw that black dragon snaking its way up and chasing after them, and she suddenly shouted. The black dragon bit down on the defensive wall in front of the two of them, immediately crushing it into powder. Why is this defensive shield so unreliable? Sikong Fulling hugged Mu Xingchen's arm and exclaimed in astonishment. Because this isn't a defensive shield you summoned at all, Mu Xingchen said helplessly. This was merely a defensive boundary he set up, so it naturally couldn't withstand a single blow from a holy beast. I understand. Mu Xingchen pulled her up and shouted, Hurry and run. Apart from summoning things that harm others and themselves, this godforsaken place seemed to be unable to summon anything good. Even if you want to think positively now, there's no way to realize it. On the contrary, Mu Xingchen hurriedly stopped his surging thoughts and shuddered violently. He almost blurted out something again. Mu Xingchen. Sikong Fulling staggered in midair and nearly fell into the blood-colored pool. Mu Xingchen hurriedly reached out to grab her. When he looked back, he saw Black Dragon chasing after them with a roar. Let's go. Xiao Mu paused in her steps and suddenly looked back. There was a patch of fragrant grass, and it was as if nothing had appeared. She turned around and took 2 more steps. Suddenly, the sound of a spirit sword leaving its scabbard rang out. The spirit sword in his hand stabbed backwards at an extremely fast speed, bringing out a figure that fell to the ground with a plop. The little stoic expressionlessly turned around to look. That thing slowly arched up, and the bones all over its body creaked. His head slowly rotated in a 360-degree circle before facing Xiao Mu head-on, and his pair of dead fish eyes rolled upward. Gah! That thing suddenly let out an ear-piercing shriek and shot toward Arbor with abnormally swift and violent movements. At the same time, the surrounding grass rustled, as if countless zombies were crawling out and gathering. Chapter 44:21. In the blink of an eye, Arbor's hand shook, and a thin piece of paper flew out from her conscience. It slowly unfolded like a painting scroll slowly opening up. Light flowed out, and the painting displayed the mountains, rivers, sun, and moon with her current cultivation. The Tianji treasure blueprint could already open up the 10th layer of the attack. Thousands of streams of light flowed out of this tiny blueprint, turning into specks of gravel that emitted a lustrous, white light. They shot out in all directions. A moment later, Arbor looked at the already quiet air around her and silently put the Tianji treasure blueprint back into her conscious. Qiu, I was just wondering if there would be corpse puppets here. In the end, Master Silver, this place can't be the legendary Realm of Misfortune, right? Realm of Misfortune? Qiu simply flew out of the star domain and climbed onto Arbor's shoulder, dancing with joy as it said, "Legend has it that in the realm of misfortune, all fantasies will come true." The little treant climbed onto her shoulder and looked around. But generally speaking, after entering the realm of misfortune, everything you see before you is an extremely terrifying place. Master was indeed quite a weirdo. From the moment she entered until now, apart from the batch of corpse puppets she had imagined, which the Tianji treasure blueprint took care of in a matter of minutes, she really did not encounter any other dangers. Moreover, in front of her, the sky was clear and green. No wonder it did not associate this place with the realm of misfortune at first. How can we leave this realm of misfortune? Arbor asked straightforwardly. Since the little treant knew what the hell this place was, it should have a way to deal with it. Qiu scratched its head and giggled. It's extremely difficult for others to get out. But if Master wants to get out, it's really too easy.
Speak.
Master, you can refine this realm of misfortune. Arbor's eyes flickered. Is that really possible? Yes, of course it's possible. Qiu nodded with a grin. Once Master refines it, the space barrier here will immediately be broken. At that time, everyone will fall out of the realm of misfortune. Arbor nodded, not fully understanding. Judging from Qiu's words, Jojo's Lotus, Yujichen, and the others should have also entered the realm of misfortune, but they were separated by this mystic realm. If the secret realm was refined, they would naturally be released. Without saying a word, Arbor waved his hand and laid out a blanket. He sat down cross-legged and slowly closed his eyes. Divine power from all directions gathered toward her and quickly enveloped her entire body. This wasn't Arbor's first time refining a mystic realm. This level of refining was already a walk in the park for her. As such, he quickly got into the zone right from the start. Even Qiu was a little taken aback. Master Silver was so formidable. Previously, when refining the mystic realm, there had been at least a period of preparation. But now he did not need to expend any effort at all and directly started. At this moment, young Master Ding was standing on an abandoned hill with a frown, looking up at the mirage in the starry sky. He did not know what the little fellow was doing. A large wave of corpse puppets had been destroyed by the Tianji treasure blueprint just like that. Now, she was sitting on the ground as if nothing had happened. Was it because she had overused the divine power she had injected into the Tianji treasure blueprint just now? Young Master Ding could not figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. He realized that the mirage in front of him was slowly disappearing. Chapter 44:22. What's Jojo doing? Yuan Shurchen pulled out his sword from the wall and turned to look at Mo Lian, who was studying the illusion carefully. This place was really strange. It did not allow them to meet Jojo, but it allowed them to see Jojo's movements from time to time. It made them itch and annoyed. Mo Lian was silent for a long time. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over impatiently and pushed him. What's wrong? We'll probably meet Jojo soon. Oh. Yuan Shurchen's interest was immediately piqued. They had been walking back and forth in this dark and gloomy cave for a few hours. It was the same path, the same scenery. They had already killed 3 snake kings that were as thick as bowls, but they still could not find a way out. However, each snake king was stronger than the last. Can you stop letting your imagination run wild? Rein in your thoughts. Emolien looked at him helplessly. Why do you keep thinking about snakes and snake kings? Can't you think about scorpions and centipedes? As Emolien said this, he suddenly realized something. He slowly turned his head and met Rotten Peach Blossom's eyes. The two of them quickly turned their heads and saw a large number of centipedes and scorpions climbing down from the wall. Without another word, they broke into a run. Their slender figures flashed through the cave like lightning.
Fuck.
The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but curse. Emolien, are you a pig? You told me not to think nonsense. What are you thinking about? Can't you think about 17 or 18 Jojo? Jojo hugging a gold brick, Jojo hugging a jade pearl. Do you think it's a perfect picture? There's no use thinking about it. There's nothing beautiful in this place of misfortune. Would it conjure up 17 or 18 cute Jajas?
Dream on.
So, why don't you think about centipedes and scorpions? Why don't you think about an 8-horned centipede king that broke out of the wall?
Boom.
The cave in front of them collapsed. The shadow of a black and white behemoth crawled out of the crack in the wall. Emolien felt her scalp go numb. She slapped the black line of fire away and scolded, "You're the pigs." Ma Shurchin wished he could bite off his own tongue. Mu Xingchen, I'm telling you, block it.
Block it.
Sikong Fuling clutched her bloody arm and widened her eyes in horror as she stared at the big black dragon spewing lightning across from them. If you do that again, I'm telling you, I'm done for. It's over. If it were any other time, Sikong Fuling's rippling voice would certainly make people laugh. But now, they really didn't have the energy to laugh, and the two simply couldn't cry. If I die, then so be it. Mu Xingchen closed his eyes and took out 17 to 18 divine power beads from his inner world. Wait. Could it drop? Will it affect us? What's going on, Mu Xingchen? Did you notice that the ground is shaking? No, that's not right. It seems like the entire space is shaking and shattering. Mu Xingchen grabbed Sikong Fuling and leaped backward. He was about to throw out the divine power beads in his hand when he saw the black dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws in midair. It seemed to be bound by something as it roared and rolled in the air. The dragon's entire body was tightly constricted in a whirlwind as though it was being sucked away by some demon-subduing spirit weapon. It turned into a cloud of dust and disappeared before their eyes. The sound of something shattering could be heard. The two of them looked at each other and screamed as their bodies fell down. Arbor caught a pitch-black round heart of misfortune when he heard a chuckle behind him. Jojo. Chapter 44:23. Arbor turned to look and could not help but frown. Why was it him? Young Master Ding was dressed in a light blue robe that was spotless. He looked rather elegant and at ease. It seemed that the realm of misfortune did not cause him any trouble. This guy did not look disheveled at all. What a coincidence, Jojo. Arbor did not say anything. She only glanced at him from the corner of her eyes, then looked around. At this time, they were stepping on wet and gloomy water, and the walls were damp rocks. This was an underground karst cave. A faint light shone from the end, looking purple and yellow. Ding Yin walked slowly to her side and said casually, "Jojo, it seems that we have to walk inside to find out what happened." That realm of misfortune was so strange. It's not strange to say that it swallowed 20,000 people. Although Arbor did not say anything, she agreed with young Master Ding's view. Seeing that she did not speak, Ding Yun's expression was calm, and he was not angry. He smiled and said, "This place is very narrow. We can see a thing or two at a glance. Why don't we walk forward together? Maybe there's a wider area, and we can find traces of people. This underground cave is very big. Be careful." Qiao Mu reluctantly gave him an unsightly look before nodding. With one foot higher than the other, Qiao Mu felt uncomfortable everywhere as she treaded on the cold, damp water as she advanced. Fortunately, she had changed into a pair of thick boots before she left. Otherwise, her feet would be soaked and she would feel even more uncomfortable. The further they walked, the wider the area before them became. This karst cave looked very deep. There were stalactites of different shapes hanging from the ceiling. Some of them were especially sharp. When Ding-Yun walked over, he almost accidentally tore his sleeve. In such a dark and damp place, Arbor had goosebumps all the way. She hated this kind of gloomy and cold environment the most. It made her have a trace of bad memories. The dungeon was just this dark and damp. There was also a lingering stench in the air. "Jojo, do you want to rest for a while?" Ding-Yun stopped and turned back to look at her. The little girl seemed to hate this place. He could tell from her expression of disdain.
Rest?
It was wet everywhere. Who would want to rest in such a damned place? Arbor shook his head. "Let's go." Young Master Ding nodded and continued forward with her. After walking for a short distance, he saw a black shadow flashing at the end of the cave. Then, it disappeared without a trace. Ding-Yun stopped and turned to look at the expressionless Arbor. There seems to be something. Jojo silently slapped a few more defensive talismans on her body and opened her eggshell defensive artifact. That's right, this eggshell-like spiritual weapon had been improved by Prince Mo not long ago. Now, not only was it more durable and sturdy, the amount of divine power needed to use this defensive divine weapon was also greatly reduced. Ding-Yun turned back to look at her. He suppressed the smile that slipped to his lips and coughed lightly. "Don't worry. Someone is probably just pretending to be mysterious." Arbor gave him a "I seem to be worried" look and silently clenched the spiritual sword in his hand. The two walked forward for less than a quarter of an hour. The sound of flowing water entered their ears. A black shadow suddenly slid down from the pitch-black stone wall and quickly pounced on the two of them. Ding-Yun immediately stepped in front of Arbor and grabbed the other's shoulder with lightning speed. The moment he touched her, he felt a bone-chilling coldness freeze his fingers. Chapter 44:24. Immediately, he channeled a trace of Wood's spiritual energy and slapped the person's chest. With a crack sound, the thing's head seemed to droop, as if it had been fractured. If it was an ordinary person, they would be finished immediately after being slapped by young Master Ding, and would not be able to do anything else. However, it was obvious that the thing in front of them was not an ordinary person. A series of bone-cracking sounds could be heard, and in the dark and silent cave, it was somewhat hair-raising. The black shadow with its drooping head slowly raised its head, and two clusters of green willow, the wisps, appeared in its eyes. When it shone in the dark cave, Arbor immediately averted her eyes in disgust. Suddenly, a hand reached for her shoulder and grabbed at her through the defensive barrier, but it was quickly rebounded by the defensive light. That person seemed to be in pain from the rebound, and cursed out loud, "Stupid girl, look carefully before you hit me." Xiao Mu turned around for a glance, her brows knitting together. "Why is it you? Why can't it be me?" That person rolled his eyes at her in annoyance, then looked behind her and his expression changed. "Come with me quickly." He turned and rushed into the stone wall beside them, disappearing in an instant. Arbor was surprised. It seemed that there were stone walls all around them, and they looked quite sturdy, but she did not expect that guy to pass through in an instant. "Jojo, let's go." Ding-Yun called out to her. Arbor came back to her senses, and the sound of wind brushed past her ears. She instantly looked up. She saw a dense mass of 30 to 40 ghostly things with flickering eyes on the stone wall, one after another. Some were hanging on the stalactites, while others were lying on the ceiling of the cave. Suddenly, they let out strange howls, climbed down from above, and pounced on them. The two of them made a prompt decision and threw themselves into the stone wall beside them and passed through it in a flash. The scene in front of them stunned everyone. They saw tens of thousands of people sitting in a spacious place that looked like a drill ground. If it were not for the dark surroundings and the dripping of water from the stone walls, Arbor would have almost thought that they were in a martial arts drill ground. In front of them were rows upon rows of silent soldiers. All of a sudden, their eyes swept over the two of them. Arbor and Ding-Yun both crashed into this large military field. Their very sudden appearance naturally attracted a lot of attention. Everyone was sizing them up, and they were naturally sizing them up as well. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. The soldiers sitting in a row had their hair tied into a braid. They wore black jackets and knee-length fur skirts. Their attire was so unique that it was naturally the special taste of the people of the underworld region. "Why are you here again?" Akir had just opened her mouth to retort when Yasi, who was standing beside her, swept a glance over her. "Shut up." Ollie rubbed his wrist that hurt from the defensive block and grumbled repeatedly, "Eldest brother, you don't know, but when I went out to bring them in just now, my hand was shaken by the little stoic's defensive light. Why did you go and grab her for no reason?" Minyas said indifferently, "You're asking for trouble." It wasn't his first time coming into contact with this stoic face. He should know what kind of person she was, right? She was a little hedgehog that pricked anyone who touched her. Ollie was indignant. He pursed his lips and snorted, grumbling, "Isn't it all to remind her?" Minyas' face was stern as he strode to Arbor. "Long time no see." Chapter 44:25. Sir Jojo swept an expressionless glance over them. His pitch-black eyes looked around with a spirited expression. Many people were squeezed together. There were at least 10,000 people in the entire large field. "You guys?" Ming Yasi followed her gaze and looked around. "We were originally planning to gather here and rest for a while before informing you. Indeed, this place wasn't far from the Lishan Island they'd originally booked. Most importantly, it was difficult to sail the ship due to the fierce winds and torrential rain that day." Ollie pursed his lips. "Big Brother said that we should take shelter on the island." Ming Yasi nodded slightly in silence. Arbor was rather surprised. She'd received news that 20,000 people from the Divine Prefecture and Song Prefecture had arrived on the island. She hadn't expected that the Dark Prefecture army had already arrived. "How long ago?" "We've been trapped here for at least 5 days," Ming Yasi said with certainty. After they'd been trapped, he'd been instructing people to keep track of the time, so he was well aware of the passage of time. Xiao Mu creased her brows upon hearing this. This meant that Ming Yasi's group had arrived earlier than the elites from the Divine Prefecture and Song Prefecture. But didn't they find it strange? Arbor glanced over. "Why must we rest on this deserted island?" Ming Yasi's expression froze. He thought back to that day and said in a low voice, "That day, the winds were fierce and torrential. A few ships just happened to run aground." When he said this, he also felt that this matter was rather coincidental. He was an intelligent person to begin with, so he immediately understood some things. "Jojo, you mean that someone deliberately set up a formation in the water to lure us onto the island?" Arbor nodded. Wasn't this already very obvious? When she'd come to the River of Forgetfulness with Long Shi's group, they'd also passed through this waterway, but nothing had happened to them then. There's a natural realm of misfortune on this island. Have you encountered it before? Of course not. Otherwise, these people wouldn't still be in such a neat and tidy state. Although these soldiers were all experts above the 12th level of the spirit realm, most of them probably wouldn't be able to escape unscathed in the realm of misfortune. Arbor looked up at Ming Yasi when she thought of this. As expected, Ming Yasi looked at her and shook his head. "Realm of misfortune? Never."
"Oh."
The little stoic replied faintly. Everyone's gazes simultaneously looked towards the little stoic's expressionless face. Why did he suddenly feel that the air was a little quieter, as if there was nothing to say?
Could it be an illusion?
The soldiers looked at each other, then silently shifted their gazes to His Highness Maya's. Ollie couldn't help but chuckle. "What realm of misfortune? You make it sound so mysterious. In any case, we've never met them." "What's wrong? Did you fall into the secret realm?" Young Master Ding smiled and nodded elegantly. "We did fall in, but Jojo quickly fished us out." Ming Yasi creased his brows and approached the little stoic. "Come here." Xiao Mu straightforwardly took a step back. Everyone's gazes instantly landed on her. There were very few women who dared to be so impudent in front of His Highness. Young Master Ding also stepped forward to block her and said with a smile, "Ming Province's crown prince, The most important thing we should do right now is to immediately discuss a strategy to leave this place. Ming Yasi's cold gaze swept over young Master Ding. Move aside. Chapter 44:26. I don't need you to remind me. This highness naturally knows what's most important. Ming Yasi glanced coldly at Ding Yun. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Akir's cry of alarm from the other end. Brother! She staggered over as if possessed by a sickly beauty. She clutched her chest with one hand and fell towards Ming Yasi in a panic. Ming Yasi's body movements were honest, and he very swiftly shifted his position to the side to avoid her fall. Seeing Akir fall head first onto the ground with a cry, Ali hastily reached out to support her. He then called out, Akir, what's wrong with you? Young Master Ding turned to look and just happened to see the little stoic's taut face. She rolled her pitch-black eyes, a faint disdain showing on her face. This little expression was truly so vivid that it made people feel that this stoic face suddenly radiated with a bit of brilliance. Poison, Akir's face flushed red, and she cast a sidelong glance in Arbor's direction. As a result, the surrounding soldiers, as well as young Master Ding and Ming Yasi, naturally focused their gazes on the little stoic again. Everyone knew that this stoic face was an extremely outstanding pill talisman master. Miss Akir's pained expression couldn't have been that this stoic face had secretly attacked her as soon as she came in, right? Who knew that the little stoic would expressionlessly glance at Akir? Don't you know how to act too much? Ming Yasi also reprimanded with a sullen face. Stop fooling around. Quickly stand up straight. Akir clutched her collar with one hand, crumpling it. She turned to Ming Yasi with a pained expression and asked, Brother, you believe outsiders and not me?
I wah.
As she spoke, Akir suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and everyone's gazes instantly changed. Ollie grabbed Akir's arm especially agitatedly and glared at the little stoic. What's wrong with you? Are you looking for trouble as soon as you arrived? I specifically went out to lure you guys here to take refuge, but you avoided trouble? The little stoic was silent and didn't say anything. Akir whined and wept. On the other hand, Ming Yasi glared at his younger brother with extreme impatience. Can you grow a brain? Don't lose your wits just because a woman cries with a few words. How can I let you manage the Wuzhong army in the future? Ollie was instantly rendered speechless by his brother's scolding. He could only stammer, but Akir. She looks very uncomfortable. The two of them were so far apart. How could she poison him? Do you think you can poison her alone when there are so many of us here? Ming Ya scolded in annoyance. Scram to the side. Ollie thought about it and agreed. His face alternated between green and white as he cast a sidelong glance at Arbor. He was about to help Akir to the side. Unexpectedly, Akir's body trembled violently as though all the hair on her body was about to fall off. She spat out another mouthful of blood. How could the surrounding soldiers still sit still? They all stood up and stared at Ding Yun and Arbor with vigilance. Young Master Ding grinned and reached out to block Jojo. His expression was calm as he cast a glance in Yasi's direction. Isn't it interesting? Ming Yasi's handsome face darkened as he stared coldly at the smiling man in front of him. You did it? Ding Yun tilted his head. Isn't it interesting to pretend to come true? You... Ollie pointed at Ding Yun. Hurry and treat Akir's poison. Young Master Ding shrugged. That will depend on her luck. Chapter 44:27. Ming Yasi's gaze changed, and he looked at the person in front of him warily. Just now, most of his attention had been on this person. This person looked like an elegant and gentle gentleman, but he didn't expect him to be so ruthless. Other than Arbor, probably no one present knew when he attacked and how he poisoned her. As expected, young Master Ding's special ability was extremely interesting. Not only could he change his appearance at will, but he also fused the venom of the evil beast, Fire Qilin Fanged Snake, and turned it into his own ability to dissolve poison. This was a person who was born with poison. He didn't need to wave his hand at all. As long as he wanted to, he could release poison and kill people with just his breathing and speech. Akir, hurry up and get over here, Mingyasi called coldly. Under his icy gaze, Ollie could only quickly retract his hand. Once he let go, Akir weakly fell to the ground with a plop, and her entire body lay on the ground powerlessly. Your clumsy act has already been exposed, Mingyasi said coldly. Hurry up and apologize? Don't you want your life anymore? Akir glared furiously at Arbor. This person was born to oppose her, right? Ever since she started fighting with this person, she had never gained any advantage over him. The most abominable thing was that this kind of woman actually had an ancient marriage contract with Big Brother Yasi. Truly infuriating, truly infuriating. Her brother said she was acting, but she clearly hadn't even started her act when she was really fucking poisoned. Gazing at Arbor's infuriating, exquisite stoic face, Akir pursed her lips as if she found it difficult to speak, and a mosquito-like voice came from her throat. So sorry. A wave of fury assaulted Akir's heart. Why did she have to lie here and apologize in a battered and exhausted state while the other party looked down at her with an indifferent gaze from above? His gaze was as if he was looking at something filthy, and it made Akir's heart burn with rage. Her anger burned endlessly. Arbor walked out of the crowd. Ollie looked at her in bewilderment and shouted at her back, Hey, what do you mean by this? Didn't you detoxify the poison in her body? I poisoned them? The little stoic cast them a chilly glance. But this? Ollie looked at her, and then turned to look at the innocent young master Ding. If you open your mouth, this young master will detoxify Akir's poison. Arbor's cold eyes fell on Ollie's face. That cold gaze instantly made the young man tense up. He had an instinctive premonition and wanted to avoid it immediately. You want to die? Everyone stared at her in shock. Wasn't the little stoic a bit too arrogant? She and that young master were facing the entire Underworld Prefecture's army of 10,000 people. How could they say such harsh words to young Master Ollie? Whoever placed the poison should treat it. You've asked the wrong person for help, the little stoic said coldly. Yu was so angry that he was trembling a bit. He pointed at the little stoic before looking up at his elder brother whose expression was still unsettled. You really can turn hostile and be heartless. No one present was a fool. Once they heard this, they knew that the little girl was evading the responsibility. It was only then that Akir panicked a bit. She looked pitifully at Ming Yasi. Brother Yasi. Ming Yasi's patience with her had long run out. The more he looked at her, the more annoyed he felt. He had nowhere to vent his anger, so he turned to shout at Ollie, I already said not to bring her here to stir up trouble. You brought this upon yourselves. Deal with it yourselves. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.